Thank you. Hello and welcome to the first session of first course. This is the Erfan Halgheh program, the old curriculum. So this is the first class of eight. Uh, this is the first course of the eight main courses that we're gonna go through, and then there are two complementary courses that we also gonna cover. So today we're gonna discuss فرادرمانی, interuniversalism, or فراکل‌نگری. We're going to talk about the existential coin, cosmic T consciousness network, God, T intelligence, laws, numbers, step of logic or reason or aql. We will talk about those terminologies, and a step of ishq, definition of rend, practical and theoretical Erfan, the goal of Faradarmani, why we are using it, what is the purpose of it, definition of halqa of unity, individual connection versus collective connection, definition of shahid, or impartial observer, and submission, taslim, which are very fundamental um, notions in Erfan. They're very important. And we're going to talk about the definition of scan and expulsion. And on a practical side of it, we're going to experience the scan by cosmic force. I'm going to explain what that is. Polarity scan, and we're gonna do a Faraday connection. And I always have the sources here at the bottom right corner, and that's where you can find the sources of the material. They're all taken from the books, and we will be providing um, um, basically like notes for each class as we go. And they're not going to be perfect at this moment, but a lot of hard work, uh, very dear individuals in the Erfan Halgheh associations in Toronto, number two, put a lot of effort to put them together. So it's work in progress. We will be providing those notes to you, but please don't share them as they're not final. We just basically providing it to you for your reference. Because they're a work in progress, we don't want it to be spread out because these are just like examples just for you to reference later on when we get them as perfect as we can get. It would be published by in Dr. Tyre's website themselves. So uh, please don't share it with anyone. I know everyone wants to share it with someone else, but please keep them as we want. I don't, it's very hard to gather them back if it's spread it out, and then discourages us to share further. So if and believe me, if I would know if it's shared out of our circle. So if I know it's shared outside of our circle, I would not share any further. So for the sake of keeping everything between us, as we keeping our individual personal experiences, as we trust each other with our vulnerability, openness, let's trust each other with the content as well. So, any question about that? All right. So, let's start with one of the fundamental notions of Erfan, which is Farakol-Negari. And in Farakol-Negari or interuniversalism, which is a holistic perspective of humans' existence. From this perspective and view, humans are perceived as vast as the totality of universe. And what that means is that we are very complicated, interconnected uh, creature, being, and we have many different layers of existence. There is a beautiful poetry by Sheikh Mahmoud Shabestari. It says, "The man became the universe became man. There is not a word more refined than that." And that really portrayed this notion that we are really as vast as the totality of universe on a really quality level, and that really portrays the complexity of the layers of our existence and how they're interconnected and intertwined, and how the implications would bring a lot of different discussions that are really, really important to define very fundamental um, definitions. For example, illnesses, disorders, normality or abnormality, and etc., which we will establish. Or Maulana says, on the face, he means it on a physical form, on an apparent level. On the face, you are the microcosm, but in essence, you are the macrocosm. So we are the microcosm, macrocosm really exist on a lot of different aspects. And then it really fascinates me when I really think about it and the implication. We can see it from fractals in nature. We can see how the electrons are behaving, and from the celestial objects in cosmos, we can see ourselves on a quality level that we are so vast that this microcosm can get as vast as a macrocosm. And then we will talk about some of the aspects on a quality level as well. So in the eyes of Farakol Negari, we are as vast as the totality of universe, and that brings us to be familiar with what are these layers of existence and what are their features, how they operate, and how they are different. In conventional science and psychology, in any literature that you can find out there, we don't have such a clear categorization, and features and functions of each of these layers and how they correspond. And this coherent, interconnected perspective on all these layers give us a very, very advanced understanding of the complexity of humans' existence, mind, operation, and how that really affects our life in a wide variety of uh, the aspects of existence, aspects of life. So, according to this view, a human being consists of several bodies or layers of existence. Physical body, we are familiar with. Psyche body or psychical body, which is responsible for our emotions. Mental body, which is the body manager. And astral body, which we will get into, and then other layers like collective body and many other layers of existence. There are so many subcategories of each of these bodies that in and of itself could be considered as another layer of existence or a body. In Farsi, we call them kalbod. So that's being translated to body, which is not really the best translation, but we don't have a lot of words. So that's that. So this layers of existence, or the various bodies, each has a specific function, a specific features, and a specific capabilities that arise from them. Besides that, we have different layers of existence, different parts of our existence. For example, we have various energy channels. The energy channels that are like 14 confined energy channels, or basically the channels that is considered in acupuncture, or different energy fields, for example, polarity field, bioplasma field. We have other components like cellular intelligence or cellular consciousness, molecular frequency, and other endless unknown parts that we will get to know them as we go further, especially in Scientology. Again, it's not Scientology for people that hear. I'm not gonna repeat that it is not Scientology after like fifth course, because we already established that maybe 20 times. So if you hear it, I heard it so many times that people get shocked when they hear that word, because there's so many, I don't want to say anything about Scientology, but people don't have a very good opinion about it. So when I say Scientology, they hear Scientology and then they're like, "Oh, is this related to Scientology?" So every time I just make sure when we are in the early stages, I clarify that for people that they just like maybe clicked on this video and then they just listening to me. and so they're not surprised. So this has nothing to do with Scientology. Scientology is the knowledge of the psychical and mental aspects of our existence on a software-based level, which is a very fundamental perspective of Erfan Halgheh. I'm not going to get into it now, but there we get to know these other components that I was mentioning as the layers of existence. And Dr. Taheri actually mentions that they could also be considered, each of these so-called software or layers, software-based layers of existence could also be considered layers of existence or a body. But they're basically subcategories of each of these general for the sake of simplicity. So one of the important factor that we want to really establish is that there are a interconnection and interrelation between these bodies, and and through this interconnection there's communication with one another, which means that if anything happens to any of them, it would basically lead to affecting the other part. So if your physical body is hurt, then it ends up with affecting your psychical or emotions and your mind, your thoughts, and that basically causes a lot of different um, interrelation or receptacle consequences. Now, having such an outlook of human being, having such a view of this vastness of our existence, identifying illnesses and defects and disorders are very, very important. Generally, in conventional science, the treatment have been in such a manner that each discipline or intellectual method has examined the human being merely on the particular angle, which means that if they're like in conventional science, a neurologist is looking at the issue on a neurological level, someone might look at it on a hormonal level, someone might look at it on a psychical level, like their childhood or subconscious. There's so many various different angles that we approach a problem. And each of these particular views are only looking at one aspect of a problem, but not the other. So in conventional science, we are very familiar looking at our existence as just a meat suit, basically, a flesh and bone and hormones and nervous systems. And any problem that arises, we just want to basically justify it or find reasons through or explanations through something to do with one of these aspects. For example, if someone depressed, you say like, oh, maybe the serotonin level or dopamine level are not adjusted. Maybe there's some sort of other hormones that are basically affecting that. Maybe there is something happened to this person on a psychical level if it's like a psychologist. In homeopathy, the focus is on cellular intelligence. In polarity therapy, for example, they're only focusing or defining the illness as if there is any issue with the polarity field. And there are other different various approaches, like in acupuncture, they might see the illness as if there's any blockages in that 14 energy channels. And by doing acupuncture, they're aiming to release that tension in those channels or blockages and resolve the problem. But we discussed this before, but to covering again, because it's important, this basically goes back to the story of Molana, the elephant in darkness. In this story, a group of people are blindfolded and try to define, blindfolded in a dark room and try to define what elephant is by interacting with it and touching it. So people, who touch the leg identify the elephant as a pillar. Someone touches the back of the elephant, identify it as a maybe cushion, or one person touches the ear, identifies it as a big fan. So this story is basically saying that the subjective perception, the limited subjective perception of these individuals leads to an incomplete definition of what elephant is, resulting on absolutely and completely different definition than what the actuality or the truth of the existence of the elephant is. Now, also they're like just touching one part of the elephant and defining it, and they don't have access to all the layers, or they don't have that holistic view of what elephant is. If they look at the elephant as holistic, then they realize that it's not just, the leg or the back or the ear, but they're all interconnected, and then they're actually forming the entire one unified body of existence, which is then gets a better definitions of what elephant is. So now our approach to our problems, illnesses and disorders, and how we define illnesses and disorders is the same. So given the fact that we're really defining these problems on one particular angle, we end up having a very limited or particularly defined based on that angle definition of illness and what that means. As I mentioned, someone that relates the cellular intelligence, the issue to the cellular intelligence, they think like, okay, any defect in cellular intelligence might be the issue. Someone, doing uh, the conventional medicine or conventional science approach might just look at it as a hormonal, neurological, or other issues. So these are basically a limited definition of what disorder is. In Erfan Halgheh, which is based on Farakolnegari or interuniversalism, which has that holistic view of the totality of human's existence, which is as vast as the totality of existence, defines the illness of any disorder, obstruction, impairment, or imbalance in any of the infinite elements or components of human being. All that infinite layers of our existence are interconnected and interrelated. So any issue or any non-harmonious operation or any impairment, imbalances, obstructions, defect, and any of that infinite layers of existence could be defined as disorder. So if we accept such a definition and we want to really apply it and really investigate the implication, we realize that it's impossible for man to be able to identify the illnesses relying on their five senses and the technology that we have and the limited subjective perspective on human beings that we have. So one of the reasons for having so many variations of branches of treatment in conventional science is that the treatment has to become feasible and accomplishable for a therapist. So they need to really just focus on one particular field and study it for years and try to see if they can really understand it. And that's why they divide it into all these several specialized sub branches in order to facilitate the diagnosis and aim for its accuracy, which we see every day that there are many cases that many specialists diagnose the issues incorrectly, sometimes resulting the death of an individual or the lack of treatment. So despite of all these many diagnoses, we are still incorrect. Why? Because we are just looking at this complicated human existence as only one particular angle. So in Farad Armani, treatments of a patient is according to the definition of illness proposed by interuniversalism, by Farakol Negeri. On contrary to all the treatment methods in which diagnosis and treatments of illnesses are carried out by human beings and their perception, and the therapist has a crucial role to identifying that problem, Farad Armani has an independent role, relying on the scans of T consciousness network to search and scan the patients independently and automatically and instantly without any prerequisite other than impartiality of the observer, which we discussed before, and then the surrender, which basically implies that the individual just sits there or stands there, is just being present with no prejudice, with no um, blockage of the possibility. All it's needed is the person is impartial and just observes and let that scan happen. That's it. There's no other prerequisite. Now, if that happens, the paradigm when it comes and starts the scanning accounts for inspecting the individual's whole existence, which, as we explained before, encompasses countless different components. Accomplishing this task is not possible except through this connection to this cosmic T consciousness network, which is basically a intelligence or the factor that caused the creation of the matter and energy, which we discussed in info session briefly, and I will discuss it later. So without having this holistic intelligence beyond the wisdom, expertise, and human knowledge, we are able to have that scan and have these issues to be brought up. So the medical history of the individual, the uniqueness of that would be brought up, would be scanned and brought up by the interuniversal consciousness. And then by the process of notifying the individuals uh, by which we call them expulsions. So the notification is that you might have some sort of sensation, you might have some sort of feeling of a specific area that you might have issue with, that really notifying you that there is something wrong in that part, there is something that is being worked on in that part, and starts doing that process by a specific priority that the intelligence itself decides. The pharotherapist is someone that establishes the connection for the person that receives the Faradamani, the patient in this case, is disarmed of all the individual abilities. And it is very, very important factor. I really want to emphasize on this because it's such a fundamental and important factor for us to really establish from the beginning that there is absolutely no role of the pharotherapist uh, in regards to the process of Faradamani. The only thing is that I really like the analogy of light, like switching a light, because it's very simple and clear. Imagine if someone's sitting in the dark or working in the dark, and then you just go there and turn the light on. The person that turns the light on has nothing to do with the invention of, light bulbs, or has nothing to do with if they're experts on understanding electricity or electrical work that is being done for that to happen, and has nothing personal to that process. All they did, they just basically simply switched the light on. So they can't really claim that they're like the inventor of the light or the light bulb or the electricity or anything like that, or they can't really take any of that process or any consequence of that process personally. So it is absolutely important for us to establish that anything that happens with the halghehs and connections to the this T consciousness network is completely independent from individuals' ability or experience or belief or who they personally are, if they're good or not good, if they're perfect or not. So it's absolutely independent from individuality of that person. So it is extremely important to understand that. If we really pay attention to that and look at the implication, it means that if a 4-year-old or 5-year-old come and receive the halqa and then open it for someone else would not be any different than if I do it or if you do it or if Dr. Taheri does it. So there's no difference fundamentally uh, if to the work and to the effect of the fire harmony and the scan and the connection, that who does it. And that's exactly corresponds with what we established, that has nothing to do with the individuality of that and is just like a light. Doesn't matter who turns the light on, whoever switched it on, the light just turns on, the quality is the same effect happens. And doesn't matter how many people come and, put their finger underneath the switch and flip it all together, it still has the same effect. So we want to really establish this. I will emphasize it more and more so that this really becomes clear, especially with the classless class, which is somewhat new notion that Dr. Taheri released on a practical level. He talked about it before he got arrested in 2000, 7, maybe before that, 2000s, area. Uh, and that basically takes out the role of the teacher or tutor in terms of opening the halqeh or giving the halqeh to someone else. And I really established what that means. I don't want to create a lot of confusion, but I just gonna give a brief explanation. If it makes sense to you right now, great. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. I'll elaborate on it more. So there is difference between using Farad harmony for yourself uh, and being able to give the ability to do Farad harmony on someone else. So as someone that you join this course, uh, next session after we read through the terms and conditions and sign that terms and conditions, the uh, certificate of oath, that we not gonna utilize the features and capacities of halqes and connections and the practical aspects of Erfan Halgheh for any personal gain, whether that's status, money, or not basically associating it with any religion or any other school of thought or any personal or individual aspects or attribute. And we just gonna be basically give it to other people as we received it, as simple as we received it. We don't want to add anything to it. We don't want to take anything from it or remove anything from it. We just, if we decide to really offer it to someone else, we just want to offer it the way that we received it. And that's very, very important because the halqes and connection work and it's very powerful. So it is important people that they don't take advantage of this huge effect that it has on people's, and it can really, really transform people's life. So in that letter of oath that we will go through it together, I will send a copy that you can read it, but then you need to apply it through the Dr. Taheri's website to get, you can get a hard copy or you can get a digital copy directly. But I can just give you just to see the read through the the text, so you familiarize yourself with it. I think there must be a one on the website already, but if it's not, or if the website, because the website is kind of like work on progress, sometimes things change or things gets temporarily unavailable. But if it's there, I will send a direct link to you. If it's not there, I provide you a text that you can just read that what it is, to familiarize yourself what it is and what it says. And then you go to Dr. Taheri's website and then request for the certificate, and then you get your certificate of Farad harmony, which basically allows you to become a Farad harmonigar. What does it mean to be a Farad harmonigar? It means that you can open Farad harmony for someone else, not just be a user, but also being able to establish that connections for others. Now, through this process, there's two different ways that like we can utilize these connections. One is that we are just a user, we're using it for ourselves. But as a people that we came to the class, we're able to actually use the halqa on others. And that requires a protection layer. We will talk about that. And that requires receiving this protection layer and that ability to be able to share it with others. And that's where the classless class that I was mentioning and the role of teacher that has been changed recently comes in the middle. That before, individuals, in order for them to be able to apply Farad harmony on others, there had to be a teacher that would give that ability or assign that ability to them. Not very recently, Dr. Taheri made that public so people can actually receive that without the need for a teacher or tutor directly from collective mind. And this might be really confusing for you at this stage, but again, I'm just briefly explain it so you get some familiarity with it. I will elaborate on it more and more as we go further. So what that means is that right now, everyone, any halqeh that we're gonna receive, be receiving directly from the collective mind, and I personally, as a teacher, have no role in giving that halqa to you. Before, I would be the one opening, like, or any other teacher that would be in a role of teacher to open that ability. Is just like the Wi-Fi password, if you wish. If you remember that internet analogy, let's say we are immersed by Wi-Fi, but we are not necessarily connected to it. In order for us to be able to connect to the Wi-Fi, we need a password. But as soon as you get the password, you don't need to ask about the password every time. And every time you toggle on your Wi-Fi, you automatically get connected and you can use it. But someone had to give you that password. And before, that someone would be a teacher or a tutor, and it was necessary for you to come to the class and have that teacher. Now, you don't need that teacher to get that password. You can directly have that received from the collective mind. What is collective mind? What is different from before? I explain it to you. Don't worry about that. Just know that my role here is merely to give you the information on a theoretical level, and I have nothing to do with the practical aspects of it. I'm also learning with you. I'm also a student that, we're just learning together. So just want to establish that any teacher that is out there is the same. So no one has any special ability over the other. There's no difference between the teachers or tutors. We are all basically here to basically share the theoreticals, discuss it, learn together, and familiarize ourselves with the intricacy and the vastness of the material that Dr. Taheri provided for us. So establishing that, that's called classless class. Why classless class? Because individuals are now can independently connect, receive the connections, and also receive information and have epiphanies or revelations that it corresponds with understanding and understanding or innate level comprehension of the natural laws of how the universe works, what are the connections, what are the halqas, things that on a quality level. Like that, when I use the word understanding, is different than understanding. Again, like there's a lot of terms. I don't want to overwhelm you, but I have to discuss all this. And just for the sake of clarity, I hope that I don't confuse you. I'm doing my best, but all these terms makes more sense as we go further, because some of it is on the step of logic as we're discussing through words and explanations, but some of it makes sense as you use the halqas and experience. Sometimes, I can sit down and talk to you about all these things for hours or days or weeks or months, but you could basically use the halqa, and then with the snap, you have an experience that everything starts clicking and making sense on an intrinsic level, on a quality level. So Erfan Halgheh is about the experiential part of it. The uniqueness of it, even though that there are a lot of unique theories and theoretical aspects of it that you can't find anywhere else. The one of the most important and unique factor of it is, on top of those theoretical, is this aspects of accessing this quality connections directly to the interuniversal consciousness independently. So then you can experience it and confirm these theories within your heart for yourself. So you're not relying on me telling you or anyone else telling you this is how things work, or this is what the things that exist. So, going back to what we were discussing, it was kind of like a very long side note, but I think it was very necessary. It is important we understand the role of pharotherapist, right? That's why when I use pharotherapist, there's a lot of new terminology. I want to establish this understanding. So we established the definition of illness and disorders is very limited. And the way that we define it on a conventional science, in a classical way, is very limited. Now, in the eyes of Erfan Halgheh, under the notion of interuniversalism and Farakul-Negari, the definition of illness was any disorder, any impairment, any imbalance in any of the infinite layers of our existence. So it's very vast. We established that it would be impossible for a human being to diagnose it because of this intricacy, this complexity of all these layers that we can't really see. We don't have any means to measure it, see it, or diagnose any of it. So in order for us really to know what's going on in that intricacy and that interconnectedness and complexity, we need a divine intelligence, something that is vast. It has the access to that vastness of existence. And that's what happens in Farad harmony. Farad harmony is one of the halghehs, or connections or links, that is basically you can say like it's an app. Let's say, if in, going back to internet analogy or the phone analogy, human beings are born like as if you just take the phone off the box with no internet connection. We lived by very, very basic features, maybe like a phone call and a message and a calendar and a calculator. And then depending on who's, really using that aspects, they get more good at it or not. But then when you get connected to the internet, then there's a vast variety of applications you can install, information you can access. There are a lot of things that you can access suddenly. So halghehs are basically, you can think of it as like applications that it gets installed, and then it gives you an ability that you didn't have before. Some of these abilities you can only use it for yourself. Some of it you can use it also on others. Farad harmony is one of them that you can use it for yourself and you can use it for others. And then what happens is that when the Farad harmony is open, the connection is scanning the individuals, and you as a phytotherapist, from next session forward, after we sign that letter of oath, uh, we are able to actually open that on others and let them experience. And that process of healing and treatment happens for others in that way. And then we can really see the results. Something that I want to establish here, as I mentioned, the terminology still in a work in progress. And then there is this word darman, which can also be directly translated as healing or treatment. But there are some nuances that Dr. Taheri was not really comfortable using directly treatment or healing. So if I use treatment or if I use healing, just make sure that you always know that we are talking about a type of that basically corresponds with Darman, and that's basically something that has nothing hardware based implementation. Anything that happens is merely the effect of consciousness, that connection, in this case, Farad harmony. So every time that I say Farad harmony and treatment associated with that, there is, again, we established that already, but I want to emphasize it has nothing to do with anything that an individual would be able to do, the individual's ability or any um hardware involvement, hardware-based involvement. And what do I mean by hardware-based? It means that anything that we could do physically or on an individual level. So I hope that's established, strongly. I will emphasize and make it clear more as we go forward. So now, as we established, there's a necessity for the divine intelligence to exist. And there's no a specific individualistic aspects of phytotherapist that has anything to do with the process of healing. Now, this belief and certainty lead uh, to understand that if there is this consciousness network, then something has to lead it. Something has to basically create it and give it information to operate in a certain way, which implies the existence of God. So if we establish the existence of the effect of this T consciousness network, from its effect, we can basically infer the existence of the network itself, and then from there we can infer the existence of God. Now, it's something that we don't want to do it on a logical level. We want to experience, we want to test Farad harmony on ourselves and others, at least minimum like 10 people after next week, not this week, after next week, because we haven't received the Halgheh yet, and it needs a protective layer and all that. I'll explain it. From this session until next week, we're just going to use it for ourselves and experience it. But from next week on, you're able to actually use it on others and then get some reports. So now there are some beautiful poetries regarding this interrelation. Shah Nematullah Vali says, look clearly, because the light in which you call the moonlight is indeed the sunshine. Because the moon doesn't have any light on its own, it's merely reflecting the light that receives from the sun. So what we see on a physical level, it's representative of something else that we don't see. Um, there's another beautiful poetry. He says like, we are drunk and wrecked in the wine house, find the estate of the sweet stubber. The mirror is lightened up by his radiance. By looking at moon, find a clue, the sunshine. And that's basically is representing the relationship between this physicality of existence that exists, and we think like this is it, independent, but rather is reflecting another existential aspects on a quality level, which is God and the intelligence. Now, there are different aspects that we want to talk about, but before getting to that, surrendering, entrusting, and giving up effort and struggle in a spiritual matter and divine and kind of divine affair, and I establish what that means in the circle of Halgheh, is important to discuss. And why is it important to discuss? Because we learned really that no pain, no gain. You know, like we learned that in order, like in a physical level, anything that we accomplish, we have to do something about it, or we have something to do with that result, if there is any result. So now that we're getting introduced with something that we have nothing to do with the result is little bit unfamiliar. So subconsciously, sometimes we want to associate it with something physical or something to do with ourselves. And that's why I want to really establish this strong foundation that this is the area that we entering that we never entered before. It's the quality, experiencing the quality world as we established before. And I will get into that again. Um, the quality world, it's a world free of tools. It's a world that we can't really explain it. We can't really use the means that we are familiar with on what when we are dealing with earthly affairs. For example, putting effort, using our will, endeavor, anything that is just like having to do with trying and accomplishing something in the world of ishq, an equality world, has nothing to do with that effort and is merely a quality that is uh, existing like a fire within us, a burning fire of enthusiasm and passion that causes that. But here, the connection that is established is already overrides the necessity of anything because it's already established. We're not trying to establishing a connection ourselves. The connection is already established. What we're trying to do is to expose ourselves to that connection, and that's it. So people get confused with like we are establishing the connection. We are actually doing nothing. All we are doing is to exposing, allowing that exposure. The connection is there. We didn't have access. The access is granted. Now we are basically allowing that exposure and receiving the results and see the experiences. So there are more beautiful poetries. There are different analogies that uh, Sufis really use uh, throughout the history in Persian culture. And that is really an aim, a beautiful aim that to explain some of the quality aspects of existence with literature. Now, um, some of these analogies was not understand was not understood by general public throughout the years until Dr. Tar really decoded them and then really revealed what does those poetry means, what are those analogy means. And that was very transformative even for the Erfan and Sufism and Arifs and then Erfan culture in Persian history. Because yes, there was beautiful notions, but and people were like really enjoying it, and some people might come to a very esoteric and very transformative conclusion, but it didn't really click in that depth, in that interconnection, in that coherent um, intricacy that that is described in Erfan Halgheh. One of these portraits is the callus revealing the universe. There's a analogy, Jam Jam, is the luminescence essence of the friend, which is God. Express a need in such a place, not necessitates, which basically says as he clearly knows everything. So basically, how it's describing is from Hafiz. It says like what it's like what is being reflected in that callus. Something is reflecting to that callus. It's like there's this wine in the callus. Something is being reflected to this callus, and this reflection is illusory, but yet is representing an existence, or it's implying an existence of equality. And since this quality exists and then God is the all-knower, then there is no necessity for one to really put forward their needs. So what this means is a little bit more deep in terms of like the Erfan aspects of it. We will discuss this in much depth later. It basically says that if God is the all-knower, and if the T-consciousness network, interuniversal consciousness, contains all the information that exists, then there is nothing to be said because it already knows. And if it's already knows, there's no role for us even to say like, I want to be healed in this part, or I want to be healed in that part, or I need this. He's all-knower and knows everything. And he has access to all our layers of existence, and he perfectly knows how to put them together. And we have no role in that procedure, but all that is there for us is to let that happen, is to allow that, is to use our free will to step forward and allow that exposure to transform us from within through a quality experience. So that's what that poetry is trying to really reveal in some aspects of it. We can, dive deep into it, especially later, but I don't think that's the place right now. So I'm just gonna move forward with what you were talking about. So now here we just want to get introduced with this interuniversal consciousness aspects, and we just left it blank because we don't want to further overwhelm you with information. So you can see that, to the questions that someone asked earlier at the beginning, that how many halghehs are there? So you can see there's God and there's interuniversal consciousness, and then there's this one aspect's healing. And then that healing, it comes through the interuniversalism aspects, basically what we established as a seeing the human existence as a totality, or as vast as the totality of existence. And then one of the features or aspects that it applies for the reason of healing is Fard harmony. And then there's others that we discuss later. But for healing, what we're getting introduced in this course is Fard harmony. And by using this Fard harmony, we want to infer the existence of interuniversal consciousness. And then through that, we want to infer the existence of God. And when we really establish the existence of Fard harmony and see the effects of it on ourselves and others, and see the healing, then we can infer the interuniversal consciousness. Then all the implication falls into the discussion. How many other features are there? How are they working? Why are they there? The philosophy, the whyness, the howness, the whatness. And then from there, we can infer to the existence of God. And then we can start like really diving deep into what God is or what it's not. And that's where it gets really interesting. I mean, like all of it is interesting, but that's really deep discussions we mainly have it on. eighth course, which is the last course. So now let's delve into one of the interesting topics in Erfan Halgheh, which is the two-sided coin of existence. We had a little bit of this discussions in info session, but we want to get deeper into this discussions because it's very fundamental and it is very important. So when it comes to the coin of existence, the coin of existence has two sides. You know, the considering the interuniversal consciousness, the consciousness that governs the entire universe. Now, it has two aspects that we can observe, which is one, the actuality of existence, and one, the truth of existence. The actuality of existence is what is occurred, the event that is occurred, and we can see it is tangible. The truth of existence has three subcategories, which is basically referring to the quality of the occurrence of examination, or I would say in a general sense is the quality or intrinsic aspects of existence, which then subcategorizes to more details of that howness, whatness, whyness, you know, causality of the occurrence examination, which is the reason behind it, the philosophy of the occurrence examination, which is the whyness of it, and the quality of the occurrences examination. So we'll really delve into what that means and how are they different from each other. So now anything that occurred is the actuality of existence, is representing the actuality of existence. And whatever that is this explaining the howness, which is examining the reason behind that occurrence, and the whyness, which is the philosophy of that occurrence, and then the quality of the occurrence. Now we can make few different examples and use few different analogies. One of the analogies is mirror, and one is what you see here displayed. You see that we having one plane like let's say a blade here that is just basically we could consider it as a two-dimensional, even though that of course is three-dimensional. But you know, if we make it thin enough, we can consider it as like a page. This is like two-dimensional, and then if we orbit that very very fast, what you end up with is this cylinder. Now, if someone doesn't know the howness of the occurrence of this cylinder, then they think is that, well, the cylinder exists. Now the question is does this cylinder have the actuality of existence? Is it real? So someone might say, well, yes or no. Or the other question is that, is it truth? Does the existence of the cylinder have truth behind it? Now, in order for answering that questions, we're gonna go back to the definitions of what does it mean to be something virtual or what does it mean to be truthful. Now, what happens is that this cylinder, regardless of why happened, it exists. It occurred. There's a cylinder. We touch it. Everywhere we touch it, we can really see that the cylinder is there. If you see it, we can measure it, and we can really record it, the existence of it. So it's real, and it has that actuality of existence. But then the question is, does it have truth of existence? Well, the answer is no. Why? Because we know that this cylinder is virtual. It's just existing as a result of this fast motion of this blade. So in truth, this cylinder is just a blade, not a cylinder. So on an actuality of existence, this is a cylinder. It actually happened and occurred, is measurable, is observable, and is recorded. We can record it. But then on a truth level, it doesn't exist. And that's where things gets very interesting. Because if you use the same analogy, examining and applying it on our physical world as we know it, everything around us is made of molecules and atoms. And atoms are consisted of nucleus and electrons making this cloud around it. And the ratio of how small the nucleus is comparing to that cloud around it, just kind of an approximation, is that the ratio of a soccer ball in a soccer field. So if you want to really know the size of a nucleus comparing to how big of that atom is somewhat approximation, kind of close approximation of a ball to a soccer field. Now, this motion is basically causes the formation of an atom. So now if someone asks, is this molecule or atom that exists, does it have an actuality of existence? We say yes. Well, it forms the solid matter and also all the other forms. But the question is, does it have truth of existence? And you can see where we are getting with that analogy. This implication is that the entire physical world is actually virtual, which means that on a truth level, it doesn't exist, even though that's very, very convincing. And we believe that exists, which does on an actuality level, but on a truth, it doesn't exist. It actually is as soon as we stop the motion of the electrons, all we ended up with, the totality of physical universe, the cosmos, anything within it, just collapses to a small portion of nucleus, which is potentially could be fit in the tip of a needle. Now, the entire existence, the physical existence, is virtual. And think about the implication of it. Think about what the implication is. It's interesting implication in the sense that we are so convinced that everything is so rigid, and it only like we examined it through science, we know it through what we know, the what is possible and what is not. And on a Newtonian level, we thought that everything is very just basically transforms from energy to the matter and vice versa. And then quantum mechanic came and then just basically throw everything away, said like there's, you know, relativity, and then there is uncertainty, and then there is this dual behavior that we see on particles, on subparticles, like photons and electrons. They are particles and they're also waves. I don't want to get technical, but it's absolutely interesting. Now we are basically facing another wave in even science, because what we thought of as existence, it was very rigid. And Newtonian perception was like, this is it. Everything is predictable. Everything could be measured if you know the velocity and the position, you can basically calculate it. Everything, you can predict everything. And we did a very, very good approximation and a good model of how the universe works on a physical level. But when quantum mechanics came, then everything became really, really mysterious. There's things that we still don't know how it works. And Dr. Taheri gives very, very interesting information on that. And this is, for example, one of the information that you can gain in the new academy course that it's not discussed yet in depth. So I'm kind of touching it, like how it's relevant to a quantum mechanic, how it describes the dual behavior of electrons and photons, why there's like this dual wave particle behavior that we observe, and crazy implication on like mind of the matter, which I don't want to get too excited about it. But anyway, so this entire existence is virtual. Now, the implication, I really want to, I'm basically inviting you to really think about the implication. What does that mean? If everything is virtual, what does that mean? A lot of the things, our relationship and everything changes. For example, the physical body that we have, that we think like so on a conventional science is just meats and bones and hormones and neurons, and any problem is in that level, and we just basically a complicated animal computer. It suddenly becomes very, very software based, virtual existence and not hard at all, and very, very flexible and malleable in that sense, that if you really think about the implication, we realize that how Farad harmony could actually resolve a lot of illnesses on a DNA level, even on a physical level, things that we would consider impossible or a miracle. We realize that is actually not a miracle, it's just an area that we didn't know how it works. And as Dr. Taheri explains, there is the miracle is basically what we don't know. And metaphysics is basically a physics that we haven't discovered yet, or we don't have answers to, or we don't understand. So it's really interesting when we understand and see, understand the world as is explained in the eyes of Erfan Halgheh, and then see it from that lens. It really is really transformative on a logical level. And when we experience the Halghehs, it becomes really transformative on a quality level. So the whyness and howness, the quality of existence, are different aspects of existence. For instance, why a piece of a stone has been created, or why the universe has come to existence. What factor has caused them to be? There are a lot of questions that we can ask. It gets to the quality aspects of existence. It gets to the truth of existence. The aim of being and the hidden aspects of the existential reality. Any reality must have happened following a plan or a design. So when we talk about this motion of an electron as you see it here, the question is, what does give this electron's movement? How does these electrons know to move in a particular way to form a molecule of a stone or a cell of an eye? How does it know to not collide with each other? How does it know to form so many different variations on molecular level, on a biological systems? So here we believe that the intelligence is basically giving this movement direction, and direction causes them to have a certain behavior, and that behavior basically make them to have a specific character, and that character is basically being shown and presented in the universe, causing all these different phenomena of existence, which we will discuss this in depth in Cosmointology. Now, here there is the quality of occurrence, which examines the howness and quality of the reality and analyzes it very closely, and resembling a magnifier it in a sense that, let's say, for example, it argues if a given reality truly exists in outside world, or it's merely an illusion, or a reflection that we see, like the image of an object through a mirror. Does it have existential truth? You see yourself in a mirror, it represents an existence, but it doesn't have its existence independently. Its existence is completely dependent on some other phenomena of existence, which is us. So if you step out of the mirror, then that image disappears. So the image that we see, even though that is very representative of the truth of its existence, but is actually, and even though that it has an actuality of existence, but it's completely virtual, and it doesn't have that truth of existence. So these relationships are relative. I want to really establish that the relationship between the image of an individual in the mirror to the individual itself is, uh, that image is virtual, then the individual has a truth of existence. But the existence of the individual itself, comparing to, let's say, interuniversal consciousness or God, it becomes an illusion, and that has a truth of existence. We will also talk about that more in depth later. So the possibility of a entity in the universe to have a reality but not having an existential truth is possible, and vice versa. So we established that. And we could have a lot of things like that. For example, infrared light cannot be seen through the eyes, but it's not real for us, but it actually could be detectable by some equipments that has an existential truth in respect to our eyes. Another example would be aura surrounding human beings. That was like a myth. Now we are able to actually using Kirlian technology to photography that aura around us, and that became something visible to us now. So it has an existential truth, even though that on an actuality for us, it's not there. So if you really follow what I'm trying to establish here, is that there is this consciousness, there's this intelligence that is really governing everything. Every motion in the entire existence is being guided and being formed by this intelligence. It's just like a dance. We get to the dance analogy in a second, which is beautifully uh, uh, expressed by Maulana. So here, what we see here is that one of the fundamental notions in Erfan Halgheh, that the fundamental brick of existence is T consciousness. And T consciousness is neither material nor energy and is not wave based. Again, these are explained and really discussed in depth in the New Academy, for example. So everywhere that there's more information in New Academy, I will actually mention it so you know kind of what the content is being discussed there in more depth. So um, the implication of this is that everything around us, the energy and matter, is actually made of T consciousness. So T consciousness not having a physical form, not being wave based, not being energy or matter, it implies that we cannot use any technological means to measure it directly. But we are able to actually see its effect and test and examine and measure the effect of it, even in a laboratory setup or experimental setup. And if you really think about it, so again, as we assume the physicality of the world so rigid, we realize that it's not as rigid, in a sense that if energy, matter, and T consciousness are having a reciprocal relationship and they can convert to each other at any moment in quite instantly, then it means that the what causes the electron's motion to cause that virtual physical existence can disappear in a second if that intelligence decides so. So that basically means that that intelligence can just tell those electrons to not move anymore and just turn to T consciousness. Or it can tell to move in a certain way and then form and become a wave, and the wave becomes an energy and energy becomes a matter, which is like basically matter is like a condensed form of energy. Now, this is one of the fundamental aspects, and we really want to understand this because if you understand this, it really helps you to even follow some of the science papers that are being published in Cosmointel. This is what you see pretty much on all the papers is fundamental. It explains a lot about how things work in the universe. Now, I want to see where's that. There you go. This was a little bit off over there, but since you're on the topic, I'm going to discuss this part because it's kind of like give it a follows through. So that analogy, the movement that we see, the movement motion of the electrons around the nucleus, is same as like a dance. So as you know, the movement, something is moving is then in order for some movement to happen, like in the form of dance, then there's a necessity for a music. And in order for music to be played, there's a necessity for an instrument to exist. And in order for instruments to produce music, we need a musician. Now, this is an analogy that beautifully used by Rumi to really explain beautifully what is happening behind the scenes, in the sense that um, all the particles are dancing with a universal music that is being played by a musician, which is God. Now, this basically again implies a lot in the sense that there's layers that we see uh, in order for this manifestations to happen. The dance is the musician is basically an analogy for God, and the instruments is the T consciousness in which the musician is using a medium to play this music, and those are basically corresponding with the natural laws. And the natural laws, that the particular motion that is being followed, synchronized and harmonized by that music, the dance, is the numbers. So we see this correlation between numbers, laws, anti-consciousness, and God. And if you really look into it deeply, you realize that the human's perceptions of the actuality of existence is also follows this pattern. First, we, a human being, like in a very primitive stages, we understood numbers. We started counting. And then we got more advanced. We started to understand the relationship between numbers and their relationship with some laws like gravity or many other things. And then we started discovering the natural laws. We discovered the, weak forces, strong forces, electromagnetic forces. We discovered the gravity. We discovered a lot. And that brought us where we are at right now. And we really familiarize ourselves in a quite good amount on a physical level in terms of understanding this correlation, interrelation between these numbers and their implication with the laws. And that's like how we develop math and the very uh, almost very good approximation in physical models in physics. And then now we are in an era that we're understanding T consciousness through the knowledge that Dr. Taheri brought. That's going to really transform our knowledge in the science world very soon, um, in terms of how we actually uh, corresponding or relating these notions together. We kind of got stuck here on the science level, thinking everything is just some predestined, very fixated physical laws. And then, the quantum mechanic was kind of like a wake up call that is not as simple as that we thought. And then there's something behind it that we can't really understand. And as Einstein says, it is like a spooky effect of, for example, entanglement that happens between electrons. And now Dr. Tari beautifully like explains it, how that actually works and why, corresponding with this T consciousness aspect. I feel like I talked a lot, so I don't want to make you tired. Since it's the first session, I don't know how you guys feeling. If you need a break, we can have a break and come back maybe like 5 minutes. Let's, if you can raise your hand and I can just like look at the amount of people that they want break for like maybe 5 minutes, or if you're okay just continuing, we can just continue. I just don't want to make people tired. I know that there are a lot of information, but also the first, especially first few sessions, and in general, first course, the hours could be longer than 3 hours, but I try to shrink it down, and I try to like cover as much as I can, but I don't want to miss anything. So if anything we are not able to cover due to the limitation of time, I'll make sure that I cover it at the beginning of next session, and that might result in having an extra session. Instead of 6, we would have 7, and that's only for me. It's fine. I can go as long as 4 or 5 hours, but I don't want to. I know the mental capacity might not really follow, so I want to really respect that, and I want to have the open communication. If people, like, if the majority of people need break or need, uh, you know, they get tired, when that standard time arrives and then we haven't covered yet, I would basically, respect that and put a pause and then cover everything that is left next week. And I don't mind, if you have an extra session. The goal is to cover everything properly and with the flow that Dr. Tari beautifully put together and not miss anything. But we want to just make sure that we follow it and not just kind of skip over and miss a lot. So anyone, I didn't see any hands. There we go, 1%. Yeah, don't miss the chance. So, if there's not enough hands, I would just keep going. There we go. Two. Okay. People, three. All right. We are 30 people. So I'm gonna give it 10, like not 10, maybe 5 more seconds. You have 5 more seconds to, get to 15 people for the break. All right. Okay. Seems like not enough people. All right. Um, okay. So sorry for those individuals that wanted to break. I'm gonna go with the majority and unless, I don't know. Yeah, let's go forward. There we go. Someone else. Okay, it was five. Okay, I'm just gonna keep going because I want to cover it. Um, Maybe you can just listen to me, get a drink as we are speaking, but please also remain focused because it's important. Again, like I provide the recordings because I know that I myself, I've been teaching this for more than 7 years, and some of individuals here are with me. I have, honor to be learning with them for like maybe more than 5 years with some of them, and I see them in this group. So I just want to tell you that even me, as someone that teaches it, uh, there's not enough of learning. So you can just basically read one page like 5 years and learn more. I tell you, there's so much in implication and depth that every time that you kind of like read it or every time that you get exposed to it, there's another deeper layer that it kind of like reveals. So I really encourage you to listen to the videos again. It's very normal for people to not grasp everything. Is very, very interconnected, full of details, very new approaches. So it's very normal for people to not grasp everything. So it's very essential for you to review the material, spend time with understanding it deeply, use the connections. Mostly, that's the most important aspects of it. I know that a lot of people just, don't do any connections and come to the class every week and do that 15 minutes at the beginning and that 15 minutes at the end, and that's pretty much it. And throughout the week, they don't use the connection. I really want to encourage you to use the connection because that can really uh, internally and experientially make a lot of these complicated notion sense very, very simply by an experience, just like a blink of an eye. You can get an experience. Many of my students just tell me, after 2 3 sessions that they had like an experience, and a lot of the things that I was trying to explain them and they were like constantly having questions was like completely resolved. They kind of felt it with their being and they had like a very deep understanding of it. So I really encourage you to use the connections. Um, as you know, as we discussed before, I don't know if it was enough emphasis on it for it to click. There's two connections. One, there's like at 6 p.m., like 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. These are general connections. It's called general connections. And these general connections, there are two of them, which are different from each other. I really encourage you to use them at 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. your own time zone, and also 6 p.m. you can use them. One thing that is important is that you can also use it other times. It's not limited to those times, but I'm not going to get into why those times are set because the whole discussions, but just know that generally people use it those times is good practice if you can do it. If not, you have spare time other times you can also use it, so don't let that be a limitation of not using it at all. And then it's different than Farad harmony, so there's three connections that you can use right now for yourself. and that is two of the general link 1, general link 2, and Faraday harmony, which we already used it. And I'm just not gonna explain it too much about how they work, which I will do at some point, but right now I don't want to use the time because we have a lot to discuss. I just wanted to really have you being exposed and use it on that practical level while we are also discussing on a theoretical aspects of it. Okay, so for coming back to the concept of motion, uh, any motion basically has a direction, which basically needs to make a decision, let's say, that what direction to choose. Like, let's say one particle is like suspended in air, wants to move. There's like 360 degrees in three-dimensional space that with infinite possibility. How does it gonna move? And why? That needs an intelligence. The intelligence actually tells these particles to move in a particular way in harmony with other particles in for a purpose. And that purpose is basically, let's say, forming a specific wave or forming a specific energy or molecule in an atom. And that basically causes all these variety of phenomena that we see in our existence. So this is what one of the ways that we imply the existence of intelligence is that how does this motion happen? Now, when we talk about motion and the world, which is virtual world, now there's a lot of aspects we can look into that really just emphasizes on that um, virtuality of existence and how our observation is limited. For example, let's consider an observer who is moving in space with a specific speed. Now, as we know, when he gets closer to or moves away from a sound or light source, the frequency of the wavelength of the sound and light changes. You know, like a lot of the time you hear the ambulance is like passing by. First is like uh, really like high pitch and then, sorry, low pitch. And then as it gets close, it gets low pitch and then it gets high pitch and then it gets low. So it's like very, very low pitch, closer, high pitch, then it gets lower. So you can see in the image, as it comes closer, the wave gets more condensed, the pitch gets higher. Then the further away it gets, the pitch becomes lower and then you hear it differently. And the same frequency is being played from the source, but uh, your perception of that frequency changes by the distance. That could be sound, that could be light. So as a result, the perceived sound is at a specific pitch corresponding with a distance. Now, that's something, you know, like it experienced as a Doppler effect. The same supplies the source that supplies that sound, that frequency, is basically constant, but as the distance changes, then it actually affects the perception of that. The same is about the light source. Now, by getting closer toward or further away from light source, there's a frequency change, the color of the light and its appearance changes. And that's actually, Dr. Taheri talks about it in depth in the documentaries. So I really encourage you to watch the documentaries that Dr. Taheri uh, put together and with a great team, such a great effort, such a high quality production. There are many series that really delves into interesting new ideas and theories that explains uh, the reason behind certain things that we observe in the universe and in cosmos, and solutions for certain issues that we don't have answer for in the in cosmology. So that's basically the T consciousness cosmology. If you remember, In the info session, we talked about how Erfan Halgheh programs consists of many, many subcategories, and one of it was T consciousness cosmology. And I really encourage you to. This is just um, one of the episodes of the T consciousness cosmology. Some of the aspects of it actually really explains about how these observer really sees the real visual field or true visual field, and also like the wavelength changes by the distance, and then how uh, certain things operate the way that it does and the implication of it. So at the moment, we see the world's phenomena the way it is because we are moving through space with a near constant velocity. And that's near constant velocity. So I want to really emphasize on that. So even though that we consider it as constant, it's constant for now. And that is actually changing. Given that planet Earth is part of a solar system and is revolving with near constant velocity around itself and around the sun, the solar system in turn, it's located at one of the arms of Milky Way's galaxy and is also revolving around with a certain velocity, the galaxy itself rotating in space with a certain velocity around another center, and on and on. So after all, our perceived view is based on that ultimate velocity of our movement within this space. So if you were to live in another galaxy, we would possibly see different color range, we would see different appearance from the world. And um, it could also even, significantly change the velocity. In the highest velocity, we can really kind of imagine how that look like when the velocity increases. At the moment, we see our surrounding very easily uh, with the velocity that we have. But if our velocity increases, basically our speed increases, uh, then what we see, the perception of the surrounding, it changes, and we kind of starting to have this continuous image of the surrounding. And the faster that it gets narrowed down in a way that, assuming we could travel in the speed of light, in theory, the observer all could see is a tiny hole, like an opening, and that's it. So if you would, the higher velocity it is, then the more a connection or continuity of the image you see at the like corners, the more that happens, the more that condensed in the center, it causes the observer to only see just like a tiny little opening. If you were getting to closer to assuming, because there's a lot of limitations with that, it's not possible. It gets so condensed that we would be crushed. So we can't really get close to that speed. So um, this is another way to just basically understand that our perception of reality and actuality is very dependent on a lot of factors, and there is no such a thing as the only true image of existence. So we can't really say like there's one image of existence that is true and the other ones are not valid. For example, let's say the way that the snake is perceiving the reality, the actuality is very different than us. They're able to see the different wavelengths and actually observe the heat of the body. But so the whole perception of the world is different than us. Now, if someone asks which one is closer to the truth, there is no answer for it because, there's no one per se true image of observation, and that's just like different angles and different ways that we perceive. So, uh, we are able to see uh, the way that we see the world because of the specific um, features that we have, the frequency of our eyes, the speed that we have, the speed of Earth, a lot of different factors. Now, from the image that you were seeing here, the observer looks at the right hand side. Sorry, not this one. This one. The observer looking at the right-hand side, um, the observes the star R, and in fact, the star R is situated in the other position. So you see that the observer faces two different visual fields. One is the real visual fields, like the FE, and one is actually the true visual field. Now, so what we see is actually not where it's located. So lot of the stars that we see is actually is not exist exactly there. It's because the light it's bent, and then it comes in a different location. So uh, that's why we see it's kind of like not actual place. So a lot of the different features that we observe in actuality of existence that is just emphasizes that everything is virtual. We can't really take everything as so solid, physical, and rigid. So the real visual field angle is the angle that the observer practically observes in front of them in respect to the observed object, and the true visual field angle is the angle that the actual true location of the object forms relative to the observer. So um, now, again, if the speed changes, if some other factor changes, we see it differently. So in a nutshell, the wavelength of energy light in a very high velocity gets so condensed that it's created and compressed the wave in front of the observer. So it forms the barrier, which is basically essentially matter in front of him. So there are many conditions that that really alters the way that we see the physical world. The human's velocity in space cannot go further a certain limit. It is impossible to travel continuously in a space at a velocity of this magnitude. And we can really conclude that the universe has an infinite number of appearances, and each observer sees it in a certain way depending on their velocity in the space. So our speed in the space really determines how we observe the actuality, and that basically means that it can change and it's just not one constant image that we could see it. So it is possible that other realities exist that we cannot see it, we can even imagine it because our limitation of our perception. And the material universe doesn't have any steady or main appearance, as I mentioned. There's no truth per se, one constant truth that is only look of the universe per se. So it depends on the speed of observer and all the countless different variations or variables, sorry, and that implies that there's infinite various um, various images or appearances. So again, like this is what I was discussing, the world visual image based on the observer's eye frequency, um, which basically this is what we were discussing when I was saying like we basically seeing the true location of the sun, the actual location of sun. There is this approximation that the location is actually not precisely because of that motion that is happening. So the way that we observe the universe is really dependent on our eyes, and the particular frequency that it really determines our vision. Now, one of the interesting phenomena that happens with how we see the universe is our capacity of our eyes based on how many frames per second we can perceive. And we can really examine that in various different scenarios. For example, the formation of movie, it was actually as a result of kind of figuring out how many frames, if we would, how many continuous images, if we put together, it would feel to us, we could perceive it as a natural or organic movement. And that's about like 24 frames or 24 images per second. So if we put 24 consecutive images, if you take individual photos of an object moving, 24 images, and put them in 1 second, we see a continuous organic motions, and that's how the movies actually form. And in fact, the first movie was like a train on a rail coming to the scene, and people kind of uh, had a lot of fear observing that. It's the first movie in humans history by basically producing 24 images, putting them together in 1 second. Now, one of the interesting things that you can also test that is that, for example, a lot of the lights, LEDs and light bulbs that is around us has a particular frequency, sometimes 50, sometimes 60, depending on where you are. And that means that this light is being flickering on and off 50 or 60 times per second. The reason that we see this light consistent and constant is because our eyes only is able to capture 24. So anything faster than 24, we're not actually able to see the flickering image. But if you grab your, like right now, all the smart devices like your cell phone or mobile is capable of uh, getting 30 to 60 hertz, basically 30 to 60 frames per second. And that's why when you want to, like, let's say, take a photo from your monitor, you see that flickering image, or your TV. You don't see that flickering image because your eyes is not capable of getting more than 24 frames per second, but your camera is capable of getting 30. And as it gets closer to that hertz, usually monitors and TVs are 60 hertz, and if you have like a phone that is capable of 60 hertz, you get that flickering image. You might even see it in my um, image right now at my background, because the light in front of me actually is not fast and then in hertz. So you probably see this flickering because of that same reason. So again, the how we observing this universe is because of our eyes frequency and the speed that we are observing. For example, eagle's eyes frequency is 20,000 frames per second, which means that it sees the rabbits or the raindrops very, very slowly. That's why it has no problem just landing and getting that rabbit that runs very fast from the air. Has no problem. But for us, that rabbit goes really fast. Now, the snail has the frequency of 5. So it goes really slow for us, but for them, they're actually racing. So, like, it's like 5 frequency per second. They really going in a very normal pace for themselves. They observe it, but for us, it's very, very slow. So the frequency is really determining how we perceive the or our eye really perceives. And same, we can see it in this image, like in the train, like that reason that it gets, one of the reasons that gets like kind of continuous is because is this frames per second is increases, and then it gives this effect of continuity. So if it's able to get more images per second, you're able to actually record more of an images per second, and then you see this continuous effect on the observers. So the material universe doesn't possess a definite view and appearance, and each observer perceives it according to their velocity in space and also their eyes frequency. Every eyes is designed in a particular way to reflect the world as a particular way that like we see it in our case, 24 frames per second. So it merely conveys a virtual figure resulted for a spinning, like that atoms, like the atoms are spinning around the nucleus. We don't really see it. We see it constant because we only see it 24 frames per second. But if you were to able to observe it faster than that, we could even see the electrons going slowly around the nucleus, hypothetically. So there is also the perceptual threshold, depending on the physical threshold that we can perceive. We can see the world in a different way. For example, the snakes can see completely different. As I mentioned, we can see infrared light, and they're really having very interesting eyesight in the night because they're seeing basically the temperature of an object, even in the dark, or and which is very different than how we perceive it. So each creature, depending on their threshold of the physical perception, has a certain idea about how the material universe look like. So that also implies that universe has infinite appearances, and what we see is not that one set stone only image and actuality. And also, a bath views the world as a sonographic map, and they're able to actually um, have perceive the sound waves, and they're actually able to see the distances that they have by this reflection of this this frequencies, and the visual image of the world is not really anything comparing to how we see it. If you could talk to the bath about the boundless world and how we perceive it, we would probably laugh at each other how that is. So in summary, the diversity of perceived views of of the world is proportional to the number of the living things, from the microcosm to the macrocosm, all the creature of the world. So as vast as that, there are various forms of appearance of the universe and the way that it looks like. And again, there is whole speed of light scenario that we see in this uh, photo, that it basically uh, causes a variation in what we see and what is located where, in the sense that uh, for that light to travel to us, it takes a specific time, and then by the time that we see it, it moved from the initial position, and when we see it is not there. So the speed of light as it basically travels toward us, let's say sun is approximately 8 minutes. By the time that the light is there, sun already moved a little bit more. So let's say what we see, if you see sun, let's say that little bit of the sun at the moment that is setting, then actual and in truth is already set, and we just basically seeing it 8 minutes before, and that's basically giving another limitation of how we perceive. There's another view. I kind of mentioned that briefly, all the things that I was briefly mentioning as I was explaining, like the curvature of the space kind of bends the light, and we see it differently here. The way that we observe it, the when we look at the sky through the telescope with uh, if we would, let's say, see the object in the sky with a telescope with infinite power, hypothetically, what would happen is that the maximum visible distance would be limited to the radius of that giant circle, and a world would look like a confined, like it would be confined to that circle. And if the person would observe farther and farther, instead of seeing in front of an object, he would see the side of the object up to the point at the maximum viewable distance instead of seeing it in front of them. So like this, you see this curvature, and then where the object under the observation. So the final conclusion on a virtual world, again, like I don't want to get deeper than that because it might be getting boring or too technical. But if you're interested in different aspects of physics and how it really the implication of the virtuality of the world and how everything is virtual, you can really look at watch the documentaries, and they're really, really interesting. Gets very deep and way more explanations of other implications. So the final conclusion about the virtual world is referring to um, considering all the um, limitations and features that we discuss. We can come into the conclusion that what we see is very, very subjective. It's virtual. Each of these ways is just an illusion embedded inside the infinite number of other illusions. And then we can end it with a beautiful poetry by um, Dr. Taheri. It says that we are in a realm of illusion within illusion, not more than a glimpse of a dream inside our head. Finally, if we escape our way out of these delusions, another universe welcomes and embraces us. Now, the important question is that why universe is created as an illusion? Why should it be an illusion? Why it's not real? And the illusory quality of the material universe is a sign of an extraordinary creativity of a creator. Why? Because although it's virtual, does not have an existential, does not have an external existence, it is the carrier of a big truth, meaning that even though that it doesn't exist on a truth level, it carries an essence. It carries something very special, something that it gives a very profound meaning to its existence. And that is the capability that we are able to go toward Kamal. And Kamal is the ultimate perfection, is like the capacity that we have, that we acquired, that we are given to move toward that ultimate perfection with all the limitations that we have. So the pathway toward Kamal is running through the universes in the midst of such an illusion and transcend through those possibilities, through experiences that we gain with different qualities and the free will that we have to really exercise that and embody a specific attribute, give meaning to the specific attribute. Without us, a lot of the things would be just an idea. In order for those ideas to be actualized, we need this world. But if this world would exist as if it would have truth of existence, it could imply that God was not perfect. It needed to create something to be completed. And the fact that even though that we are carrying that truth of existence, we are virtual and illusory, it implies that the God doesn't need really us. So the creation, even though that the creation gives meaning or our existence gives meaning and definition to a lot of factors, including God, that doesn't imply neediness of God or dependence of God's existence to us. So at any moment we can just disappear and nothing gets less from God. And we are also implies that we are carrying something from the essence of God, presenting it in another level in this physicality. Within this limitations of time and space, we are able to experience it moment by moment. We are able to give meaning every moment, and we are able to really embody certain qualities that otherwise would be just a potential rather than existence, rather than an experience. There is this notion that uh, is in Quran, which is one of the references, is Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We really dive deep into this in throughout the course, and what it means is that we are from Him and we will return to Him. This is a notion that also emphasizes on the illusory aspects of ourselves. That we are basically an image that is got separated from its source, and then we're gonna return to it. So it's a very temporary journey, and which is basically uh, disconnected from its source, goes through a journey, and comes back and reunites. So um, it's really um, have a lot of implication and deep conversation that we will have. I don't want to delve deep into it because again, lack of time. It's 9 and we have only half an hour and there's much more to discuss. So I'll try to cover as much as I can. Now, the visual universe in the world of science is another topic that we can discuss. Just very briefly, I discuss it a little bit. In the world of science and modern physics and quantum physics, it is an observer who determines the structure of the world of existence. For instance, whether energy appears as a wave or as a particle, which was like that dual behavior of particle wave uh, aspects. The old perspective was the Newtonian classic physics, which basically is the mentality that whether the observer be present or not, the world of existence has a definite and indisputable reality, which can basically sustains its own independence, form, shape, nature, laws, and continues to exist regardless. Um, so basically, if there's no observer that determines the scenery of the world, basically it just basically continues and not much happens. However, in the contrary, the modern physics it observes that uh, it is actually the observer who determines how and in which form a reality appears, which is very interesting. And that basically implies whether a photon or a particle has, or subparticle electron would be in a wave-like or particle-like. And that is something that causes this dual effect. So the virtual universe and the world in Erfan is something that is really considering this features in a very specific way. Taking into account all the explanations we had, we noticed that motion, consciousness, and the virtual world in the realm of Erfan is acknowledged, and the Erfan masters or spiritual individuals with their very high wisdom, they really portrayed that in their poetry by different expressions and different aims to really explain and express that. And they really realize that there is this motion that exists within as a very fundamental aspects of existence, which like Rumi talks about, it is the dance. It says it is the dance. Um, the language of each particle is dance. It says like if you are perplexed, wandering around the mansion of love, which is or Eshq, and cannot figure out a way in or a step to climb up its roof, which is basically in a physical means. And it says every particle is bursting to speak out and groan without tongue, how it can do the language of the particle is dance. It can express themselves, but in an elegant dance. So it's the language of the particles. Beautifully said that the language of the particle is dance. The particles are dancing with that music that is being played by the natural laws, by that interuniversal consciousness, the T consciousness network. And that T consciousness network, as we mentioned, is the instrument that is being played by the musician that basically um, being played and causes that interconnection between these aspects, different forms of existence. Okay, so I would like to do a connection for 10 minutes. let's do a فردرمانی اتصال for maybe, yeah, 10 minutes is good. So let's do an etisal for 10 minutes and I will call you back. It would be also like a little break. And we continue with the discussions. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. So just to recap on some of the things that we talked about regarding this relationship between the dance, music instrument, and musician, which basically represents the numbers, laws, and intelligence and God. As we established that God has created the intelligence, which is basically equivalent to music and instruments, and then the laws governing the world of existence have been manifested by that intelligence, and then God will has been flowing and governing the world in such a way, and according to the set applications and programs that each of these aspects are running, there's some enforced natural laws. For example, the laws of gravity, the weak and strong forces, the electromagnetic forces, the relationship between the numbers, the mathematics. These are those laws that is determined by that fundamental operation that God created through that musical instrument, the intelligence, and then came as the uh, packages of laws, and then represented by smaller fractions, which is several fixed numbers. It could also be seen as universal constants, determining specific events of the universe. So what we see is this some of these aspects of existence that is predetermined, which are the laws. There are many of them. We get to know them, like in physics, for example, speed of light, Planck constant, the pi, Avogadro number, so on and so forth. And there are many different aspects. For example, the distance of Earth and Sun, and the way that the accelerations of Earth gravity works. Uh, the smallest variations of any of these operations, the numbers, could have a significant impact to the that could be actually devastating. The life couldn't exist with smallest variations. So the accuracy of this interplay, this accuracy and synchronicity and intricacy in the interconnectedness and interrelatedness of all these components, which are very, very complicated, it really shows this intelligence and show this consciousness behind all the operations that is happening, which God implemented. Now, um, since this was the first session, we used certain terms throughout our discussions that for kind of like an ease of familiarity, since we don't have, when you have a written book, you have these like subsections and parentheses, and then, at the bottom of the page that you can really define what each word is and establish the definition, so on. But when you speak, really, especially when you introduce a lot of new terms, uh, we use certain terms that is not very accurate, and it's just for the sake of ease of understanding and familiarity for the initial stage. But I really want you to familiarize yourself with the terminology of Erfan Halgheh, because it's very unique uh, and very specific, the definitions and implication that contains. And the more we really learn about the terminologies, the more we really think deep about the differences, we really understand that how the nuances work and how they're important and how they imply a lot of different things. So One of these words that might be new to you is Arif or Erfan. Like, for example, we have Erfan Halgheh, which is the name of this school of thought. Erfan means the knowledge of quality world. It has many definitions. In info session, I kind of explained it a little bit. And Erfan is also is the knowledge of quality world, is the knowledge of ishq, and the person that actually walks in the journey of um, learning about Erfan and then getting to know that quality knowledge, it's Arif. And Arif has various schools of thought that they could go, like they could be a Sufi, they could be a Gnostic, it could be a mystic, but word Arif is a very general term to basically describe a spiritual individual that walks in the journey of knowing the quality world. Now, there's various uh, ways that one can seek that quality aspects or focus on particular aspects of that quality world. So when we use term Arif, basically consists of various different schools of thoughts that they're basically investigating the quality aspects of existence as a very general term. So only an Arif can hear the sound of this music in the universe, which cannot be heard through the physical ear, and only through revelations and epiphany, through an internal insight. And it is uh, through that capacity of visualization that differs them from other individuals that are only relying on the physical senses to really like channel those informations through a beautiful poetry or writing or analogy. Um, but it also is important to know that it is natural for someone who has not heard such a tone or even like see it impossible, denying it altogether, despite of the immense logical and rational arguments. It's writing about God's ability. It's something that it needs to be really experienced, through a quality experience. And that's what the path of Erfan is about. And that's what path of Erfan Halgheh is providing specifically this direct connection that people are independently can explore those aspects of existence without any medium, without any practice, or without any um, uh, prerequisite per se that demands someone a specific capability and ability, and merely relying on this unconditional aspects of God that just provides and give that availability for us to experience these aspects. So this relationship between that is really conveyed beautifully. One of the Arifs, Shah Nematullah Wali, says that although the music his lovers play is not in tune, if he plays our instrument, he brings tune to it once more. Basically, that tune that played, that tone that is being played by that existential, truthful song of God can put things in harmonious way. It can put things together, dance it with the harmonious dance of existence. You imagine like an orchestra that there's a very beautiful piece in front of them. Everyone's a musician. They're playing harmoniously together. And then there's one, instrumentalist just playing it completely something else. It just basically destroys the harmony. It becomes very unpleasant. It's similar if we were not be harmonious with the dance of existence. It's like we're playing our own, we're basically becoming a noise in the beautiful songs of existence. So in Erfan Halgheh, we are aiming to directly connect with this interuniversal consciousness, have an experience, and let that tell us what that music is, how we can harmonize, synchronize ourselves with that dance and the music, and with that music that causes us to dance, a dance that makes us harmonious self, makes us a harmonious musician that then, as a result, we are a very healthy and very aligned and purposeful existence rather than just very random arbitrarily noises that is just get excited and depressed, fluctuating between one state and the other, kind of get being lost on what this is all about and why everything works the way it is and why it doesn't work the way we want and why we are in a state that we don't have control over, or why we're experiencing so many things that is out of our control. So through these experiences, we are able to actually confirm the existence of some sort of independent intelligence. Now, Kamdou the musician is another poetry by Amir Khosravi Dehlavi, and tune my instrument, make the harp cry as it is bursting of tunes. Come thou and play the harp, burn and turn into the dust, this heart of mine that is cherished with love. These are the consequence of that quality state that Arif experiences as an aim to connect with this quality world, investigate what is this music of universe that we can tune into. What is this harmony that we can tune into and be really vibrating by in our core of our existence, harmonious with all the aspects of existence. Another beautiful poetry by Hafiz, the musician has played such a magical tune in the circle of Sama that made even noises of chanting fade away to the ones in the state of mystical joyfulness and rapture. He's the one who has played his most unique piece of music through his spectacular musical instrument, that interuniversal consciousness, as a love melody, an unconditional love melody, that ishq that is basically flowing through that music and melody, and dedicated this magnificent artwork to human being to experience and give definition of existence and meanings that are divine, that otherwise would be only potential. Another beautiful poetry, wonderful harmony and great melody, my minstrel of love hath, every picture of the hidden that he strayeth, path to the place hath. That's Hafiz again. These are just examples of that harmonious states, that quality states that RF gets, that revelation and epiphanies that comes as a representation of that dance and a melody that exists, that one can tune into and then really channel it through beautiful poetries or harmonious excitement and ecstasy. So following the discussion that we had about the world of existence, which is created by motion, and that corresponds with the analogy of dancing, considering everything originated from the motion and establishing that that implies everything is virtual, and now we can really take this subject to the consideration that the world of Arif is a world that is with the consideration that everything is virtual. So by pointing to some of these poetries, we can really see that this is how they really perceive the world as, is virtual, even though that exists, but it's virtual. So the way that we're relating to this virtual world is no longer the way that we used to relate. One of the poetry says that your eyes cannot see anything but an imagination from the world. Leave all these imaginations behind so that the true world could appear before your sight. Which basically sees that the lens that we put with very, very rigid logical lens, it doesn't allow us to see beyond the physicality and illusory appearance of the world. It doesn't allow us to connect with the quality aspects of it, in which that allows us to really feel and experience that dance and harmony and makes us move and give those experiences of ecstasy that is organically arising and gives us a sense of love, purpose, and meaningful existence. That it just gives us a realization that our existence is not just about feeding this physical body and going after the physical needs, and kind of feeling the void that it needs to be filled with something that we are never accomplished to fill it with physical things, but rather some experience that gives us that purposefulness, that internal experience that is not just through words and concepts, is not just through some ideas that one might just perceive as a way to feel hopeful and not feel depressed, and a kind of temporary solution for this lack of purpose and for the purpose of resolving confusion, but rather actually knowing that's true. So people are not just merely looking for escape plan to just kind of believing something that they feel better, but rather you can experience something that implies something objectively exists, no matter if we like it or not, no matter if we experience it the way we should or not. Something is governing this universe. Something exists that we can experience it uniquely, individually, independently for ourselves, and confirm the validity within our heart that overwrites any logical discussions, overwrites any aim to convince someone else. It becomes part of you. And that's what could be transformative. That's what it can really transform someone on a quality level. Because words and like discussions and philosophical arguments and debates might be, satisfying the logic, but they're not really giving a permanent effect. What gives that permanent effect is a quality experience. There are a lot more poetries, but I don't want to get to all of them because we have more discussions to discuss. And once we give you this notes, you can read them through. So there are a lot of various poetries that Dr. Taheri goes through the books, that is example of these arifs having this experience of the quality world and then really channeling these beautiful words, expressing that and confirming from their own experience that yes, this world is virtual. And even though that is virtual, they celebrating being in it. But it doesn't allow it to just basically be a limiting factor of seeking what is beyond it and finding the purpose. So our RF, the RFs of Iran, all straightforwardly state that whatever we see is merely imagination and dream, and indeed we are like somebody who's asleep. And when one day, like what they call it, the day of judgments, the curtain of illusion falls down, we will find out whatever we used to see and consider being truth is nothing more than an image and an illusion, and the fact that the truth has been something else and it was right in front of us, but we were not able to see it. And such a realization could be very, very uh, difficult for the one that realizes that it was so right in front of them that they didn't see it, kind of embraced and ashamed. Are those the one captives of the virtual world and have not understood it mainly in such a way. And this is like the poetries that they really like put together. Now, we want to move into one concept that is important regarding this relationship, and that's in a very Erfanic notion, which is who are of inhabitant of the virtual world. And these are really terminology of Erfan, right? Specifically, how Dr. Taheri puts it together in such a clear way. The inhabitants of the virtual world are those who suppose the material world is the truth, basically just to see the physical world and assume that that's it, and are deeply amused by it, basically distracted by what on that appearance level is, and they do not for what purpose they have came to this life, and they think like, okay, we just came to this life and we have this physical body, we need to survive and enjoy it, and that's it. But knowing this is a virtual world and the purpose is not just observing it on a physical level and there's something behind it, there is a purpose, the question becomes, what is that purpose? Why are we really here? And why this entire existence came to exist, for us to experience it, for what purpose? That purpose is, finding that purpose is like finding the tune of the music of existence. Is like dancing the harmonious dance with the music. And not finding it means that you're just basically confused, playing a random arbitrary noises and causing disturbance to the harmony of the existence. So our job in this world is to investigate and find a purpose. And there are various ways that we can do that. But in Erfan Halgheh, we are aiming to use these established connections to have a heartfelt confirmation through an experience. And that would be a confirmation that cannot be ever taken away if it's experienced. Now, there is another relationship that you would like to look at before we move into another topic, and that is the relationship between this virtuality and the relative virtuality between each factor. For example, truth and virtuality and that relative relationship. We discussed it before, so I'm going to just cover it very quickly and move on to the next topic. So that you see that at the top you have truth, and at the bottom we have majaz. This is another term that we would like to learn, and that's virtual. Majaz is virtual, and majaz has a lot of specific connotation and has a very specific emission. So familiarizing with it is really really good. So here you see that this relationship, this relative relationship between these factors and how they correspond with the truth and being majaz, majazi or virtual, and that is the self. The image of the self, as I said in the mirror, is virtual in relationship to the self. So the self becomes true when we are comparing it to the image. But if you're comparing the self to for example, T consciousness, the cosmic T consciousness, then the self becomes virtual and the cosmic T consciousness becomes truth. And the same, the cosmic T consciousness comparing it to God, that this becomes virtual or majaz, and God becomes truth. So you see this relationship that it's relative to what you're comparing what to. Now let's start talking about the very important discussions, which is very fundamental. We discussed it before, so again, I don't want to spend tons of time since we already discussed it in info session and also like earlier. So we have two aspects of existence. As we established that there's two sided coin of existence. The dipolarity aspects of our existence, our universe, it makes everything dipolar, literally just one opposing the other, or one not being compatible with the other, or different features in a kind of dualistic way. Now here we are looking at the two aspects or two steps of the world, a step of logic or aql, or a step of ishq or love, which is basically creating this world, the world of tools, or the world of quantity, or the quantity world, or the world free of tools, or the quality world. Now, there are tools for the step of logic that are useful when we are basically operating on this step. Throughout the life, we are constantly bouncing between one operation than the other, between heart and the logic per se, more, basically said. Now, we're constantly being one or the other in a way that a lot of the decisions that we want to make, we either need to make it emotionally or logically. Now, we don't want to associate literally, like literally emotions equals to ishq, but that's like a very common language. I wanted to establish very simple understanding, and then we just make the nuances and differentiate them. In the world of quality, There is no tools. We can't measure them. There is no way to explain it. We can't create them with effort and endeavor. We can't basically create joy trying very hard. We can't, um, use a technique to produce uh, love. We can't really sit down and think and, and convince ourselves to be falling in love with someone. Or, we can't use our will to fall into the state of ecstasy and joy. If it was that easy, a depressed person could just basically sit down and then convince themselves to be happy. And we see that that doesn't work. So that shows the incompatibility with the tools that we are used to use most of the time, which is belonging to the quantity world, the world of logic, the world of tools, versus the step of ishq, or the equality world. These tools of this side on the step of logic are not compatible or useful for this other part, and vice versa. We cannot, just use enthusiasm and then utilize that merely to launch a rocket. If you want to launch a rocket, we need to go there, calculate, a lot of science, logic, put a lot of effort, repetition, a lot of techniques, thinking. So there's a lot of process on this step that needs to happen on an earthly affair, launching a rocket, getting a business done, making money, getting successful in our like education or in our job. So this is belonging to here. We can't just rely on this. A lot of people confuse these things, especially when they um, enter the world of spirituality. They think like there's a lot of notions, for example, that are really misguiding. Let's say like people talk about like the power of manifestation. They think like if they sit and then visualize something and then focus every day and then put them in their like board and then really show enthusiasm every day, and then suddenly they're gonna manifest it kind of falling out of the sky, or some sort of external event just falls into place and then it delivers it to them. And that's not how things work. In order for us to really to accomplish those things, we need to put effort, we need to plan, we need to implement actions, we need to really like put effort. And then sometimes we accomplish, sometimes we don't. So it's not like guaranteed, even though that we use our, those tools. But we could, if we want to become successful in our field, we can study, put our field, and then, like putting like our, our effort, and then really like focus and put time, and then, use all those resources and then get good at what we're doing. But we can't just sit and let's say pray, or sit and um, be passionate to become, let's say, a scientist or launching a rocket, and then suddenly tomorrow we wake up and then we are like scientist, or like we are ready to take on to a next level job. We really need to put effort. So we need to really separate those things, the earthly affair from a spiritual affair. And then we need to really separate these two aspects, understanding and approaching the quality and aspects of existence. We cannot really, when we go to the quality world, we cannot use the tools of a step of logic or quantity world to understand or to experience these things. When we want to really experience this step of ishq, it's just a world without tools. None of these would work here. And that's why, for example, when we want to step into experiencing T consciousness fields and cosmic T consciousness network and etisals and halghehs, we basically want to set aside everything to do with this world temporarily. We're not saying this is unuseful. We are saying it's not compatible with these experiences. So when we want to approach this world, we temporarily set aside those things. When we have a quality experience like a revelation, epiphany, then we come back to basically use uh, this tools of a step of logic to really basically analyze the information, for example, that we receive, if to examine if it's sound, like, because there's a lot of information we might feel, there's or receive. There's a lot of feelings that we might experience. So analyzing is where happens after, for example, the connection. So these tools are not compatible. In order for us to really understand how to approach each of this world, we really need to have clarity about how these features are completely independent and separate from each other. They're completing each other in a way. There is a necessity for one for the other, and then it is important for us to uh, develop that differentiation, that understanding, and be able to differentiate between these two aspects, because otherwise it can cause a lot of confusion. And then it actually did, because you see that a lot of people that they want to achieve some sort of quality spiritual state, they thought that they need to put some sort of effort endeavor, so they ended up doing all sorts of ceremonies and rituals that are physical. Like one thought that they need to fast, or like hang themselves upside down, or sleep on it nails, or walk on the glass, or like dance under the sun, or like use this substance, or sit down and visualize, or you know all sorts of things. They thought that they need to do this in order to get there. Why? Because we thought that no pain, no gain, and kind of concept that we need to do something in order to get here. But in the world of quality, we don't need to do something. There's nothing to be done. What causes the breakthrough to access information is quality, is enthusiasm. So basically, what happens is that there's two ways that one person can establish a connection. Anyone in the world can establish connections with God, but there is two ways. One way is an individual way, you see on the left, and another way is a collective way. The individual way is what has been throughout the history. There's this individual that is curious about some truth about the existence, or wants to know about the natural laws, or is interested in something on a quality level in the path of, let's say, Erfan, like a general Erfan, not Erfan Halgheh. And then he is facing a very, very extreme resistance. In order to get connected to God, there's extreme resistance that the only mean that can break it through is enthusiasm. No one put this in such a clear way. I've done my study in many schools of thoughts. Like, if you can go, I challenge everyone, bring anything as clear as this. There are references in Quran, as you see at the bottom, that it actually pointed out and hinted us, but it wasn't so clear, it wasn't so evident until Dr. Taheri actually clarified and decoded it, and then it made sense what this was hinting to. And the hint is that there is only enthusiasm necessary to break through a resistance on a quality level, to establish a connection, to get in a spiritual experience. And this makes sense because when you look at it, throughout the history, we did experience miracles, for example, but the miracles wasn't just exclusive to one religion or the other. Like Christians also experienced miracle when they were going to the church, and then someone was like paralyzed and then they got healing. There are some reports like that. Maybe there are not a lot, but there were some reports that happened, that was reported, and people experienced that they had some sort of terminal illnesses, paralysis or something like that, and then they went to the church, for example, and they prayed hard, or something happened, and then they got healed, and miracle happened, so called. Same temple in Buddhism happened, temple in Hinduism happened, in for Jews happens, for Muslims happens, for shamans happens. So what's going on? What is actually happening here was never like put so clear. So Dr. Taheri clarified that it's not the action, the task, that physicality of the task that determines breakthrough this resistance and receiving that so-called miracle, is the enthusiasm. Someone can put that enthusiasm in a temple in India. Someone can do it. Doesn't matter. Or like being a Christian church. Someone can do it in a mosque. Someone can just basically put it in nature or in the corner of their room. Doesn't matter where they are or what they believe. But if they basically what their faith is or their religion is, if they break through the resistance through enthusiasm, then there is a law that says, ask and you shall receive. That's a natural law. And that's basically corresponding with this verses in Quran. It says, Ud'uni astajib lakum, which basically means that ask and you shall receive. What this simple sentence implies is that if you ask hard enough, then you will receive. But of course, there's a lot of natural laws. For example, no matter how hard someone asks that they want to fly and like kind of have develop some wings and start flying like eagle, that doesn't happen because there's so many other natural laws that overrides that possibility. So within a reasonable alignment with natural laws, if someone puts an enthusiasm, enough can break through. And this is for the individual path. If someone just on their own, not relying any book, not relying on any method, any schools of thoughts, any other idea, any other practices, they themselves go alone and then just have their spiritual journey, however that looks like, and then break through this resistance and then be able to break through and then get that connection. And then God, if someone breaks through this, establishes that connection, depending on what the person asks. Someone just asks for their illness to be healed, then basically shall receive goes through this agents, which is the agents of God, and then it's delivered, which is basically the interuniversal consciousness agents, administrators, that they deliver it to that individual. So this could be remain on an individual level, which is the individual path. This person can't do the same thing on someone else, or no other person can do exactly the same thing this person did on a physical level and achieve that. And that's basically what is observed throughout the history as well. A lot of people thought that if someone went and sit in a particular form or did this particular sequence of movements or went to that particular place at that particular time, then they might get what they ask. And this caused a lot of people to develop all sorts of ceremonies and rituals associated with all sorts of locations and times and cultures and beliefs throughout the history. But the truth was very, very simple. And no one actually put it so simply until Dr. Taheri, that is just an enthusiasm. You can show this enthusiasm through walking the stairs by your knee, as some Christians do. You can show that enthusiasm by fasting. You can show that enthusiasm by dancing under sun. You can show that enthusiasm by hanging yourself upside down. You can show that enthusiasm in any form you want, but doesn't really matter. You could go a way easier way, just sit and simply have the enthusiasm. But enthusiasm is not something that someone can produce relying on the step of logic. They can't force it. They can kind of use repetition. They can't do rely the will, effort, endeavor, all that imagination, reasoning, advice. None of this works. What works is just from this step. And then how do you produce enthusiasm? No one can do it because it's not a tool. It's something that needs to just burn within the heart. And that's what it makes it unique and almost like no explanation or direct direction or instruction to achieve it. Now we go to the collective way, which is Erfan Halgheh way, which basically talks about the halqa of unity. It says that if there is me and then there is a you, the third aspect becomes the cosmic T consciousness network, and the fourth become God, and this halqa forms this whole situation that brings the divine reward, and that divine reward is the connection that these people can experience. Now, because this is decoded by Dr. Taheri, establishing this is as simple as nazar, because we already given the Wi-Fi password. So this is like you gonna go invent the modem router for Wi-Fi, invent the whole technology, put all the effort. This is an analogy, of course. I think you know what I mean. You need to put an individual effort to not reinvent, but invent the whole thing if you could figure it out. You know, if you could actually get all the component right and figure it out, then you get to this on an individual scale. But here, if someone like break through this on an individual level, and instead of asking for something individualistic, asking something that actually includes the entire people in the world, then you get this. This is incredible. Never happened in human history. No one knew how to access this until Dr. Taheri accessed this information and capability. This is incredible. This means that now we don't need to go sit and do all those crazy things and then experiment years and years and say those like words that we don't know actually what that means and repeat them in this specific day, and then the time of the god is past, then it's closed until next year, and then we need to wait, pray hard and cry because the time now passed. So we don't need any of this. Now we have this. We have a Wi-Fi password if there is you, and then there is me, which basically forming this unity. Then we have this whole situation, which we are basically experiencing in the Erfan Halgheh program. The connection now, this is going beyond. This is one form of it, because now this me even doesn't need to be here. Because this me now is just basically the collective mind. Now you can directly, that can be a collective mind. So you don't need me anymore. You don't need a teacher. You don't need another person. You can directly establish this through the collective mind, get connected to this, and have all the divine reward experience done. And this becomes such a interesting situation for human beings because it's something that is completely independent and unstoppable. Like no one can stop this anymore. If it was relying on a person, if that person's would, die for any reason, that would be it. Which, there was some connections, for example, establishing when they say in the story of Jesus, for example, they say like, he died, he was crucified, and then he came back and then talked to his disciples and then gave them what we know as it's some particular connection that allowed them to actually go teach. And they also said like, we don't know how to teach it. He said like, you go and then Holy Spirit tells you how to do it. And then they just go and then do it. And then that doing is because it's not coming from them, it comes from the consciousness, but it was very limited, and then it got stopped at some point for some reason. But now we can see the 4-year-old can come with no experience or any enthusiasm or anything and establish this entire thing and then apply Farad Harmony on someone and heal. There's beautiful poetry. It says like, if you see the treasure box within yourself, you can do what Jesus was doing. And this is what is happening now, that we are capable of doing, establishing a connection. Its same feature is not exclusive. Well, it was exclusive until it was decoded. Now it's not. It's publicly shared. We can access it. So now the principle is that if you're using collective way, we need to keep it collective way. We cannot associate it that to our individuality. We cannot associate it with anything like that. And that's the importance that you see, underlying importance in the letter of oath, that you take oath that when you receive this collective feature that allow you to not having to do all this and establish this like a glimpse and blink of an eye, and then provide that feature to other people, help them to utilize this powerful, unconditionally loving aspects of God that is harmonizing, healing, aligning, synchronizing, and give purpose and a lot more. We keep it the same way, simple. We keep it in a way that the focus is on the glorifying God, glorifying this aspects of God, this unconditional aspects of God, the Rahmaniyat Ilahi, we say, the divine Rahmaniyat, that is representing that unconditionally loving aspects of God, that we can utilize it independently and everyone can do it independently. And that's the beauty of it. Make it simple so we really use it, confirm it for ourselves on a heart level. Again, not on a logical level. Yes, it's very beautiful for me just to give you the great news that hey, you don't need to do this hard things anymore, and you can just have this, just toggle on your existential hypothetical Wi-Fi switch, and then boom, you have suddenly like exposed to the most fascinating thing in human's history. These are big claims. I don't want you to believe me, my words only. I want you to experience it. And the only way that you can confirm it and then have that transformative throughout your life is by this experience. So a person can ask after like establishing the connection is so simple. As soon as they nazar, which I talked about it before, but I will explain it more, that glimpse of an intention, that 0-second intention, or you could even call it intentionless intention. So almost there's no intention that you've done, but you also did, but there was short that you're not sure that you actually did it. So, you know, it's confusing, it's simple, it's complicated, but it's so simple, very simple. Like it's something that you didn't do and do at the same time. And that's craziness of the dipolar universe when it gets to the world of love, because not everything fits to the logic to be one way or the other. Logic, literally philosophy, one of the principles is that it can't be contradictory. But there's a lot of things in a world of ishq that is contradictory because it doesn't fit in a dipolarity. It surpasses that and it's unipolar, containing both. So when you're surpassing dichotomy, when you surpassing duality, then both includes and neither exist at the same time. So it's incredible. We'll talk about that a lot in future courses. But so this is simple, that intentionless intention would cause triggers that nazar, and that basically sends that aim to God, and God would deliver because the connection is already established. There is no resistance, as you can see. Here is the resistance. We have nothing here. Straight to God, timelessness, implemented through agents. It comes to divinity consciousness, cosmic T consciousness network. Why there is this separation? There's some filters here in ecosystem's mind that we will discuss later, but just consider that as one agent and administrator of God that would implement it to us. A lot of individuals make a mistake that thinking like you're asking T consciousness network and receive. That's not how it works. We're actually asking God through that 0-second intentionless intention, and then we receive it through agents because God is ineffable and can't fit in the dimensions to implement. Now, there is categories of individuals, and it becomes something that could be discouraging for some people, and I want to explain this and really help individuals to not be discouraged, because as soon as you want to try it next week, you want to receive the Halgheh Faradarmani and become a Faradarmangar. In the first section I used Farotherapist 2-3 times, but that's not a proper terminology. It's just for the sake of having an idea what that means. But basically, someone that does implement the Faradarmani is Faradarmangar. And that basically was being translated before as a so-called Farotherapist. But again, therapy can imply a hardware-based something to do with the individual's implementation. We want to completely avoid that. So that's why we don't use Farotherapist. We use Faradarmangar, and then we explain it. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, when you want to, explain these or test Faradarmani, let's say on someone, or the halqa that we're going to receive tonight, which is not Farad harmony, but is an aspects of that. But we could use it on others, kind of like test it just for the sake of testing. And I explain what that is and then how we can test it. We encounter two different individuals. Generally, the individuals without prejudice and individuals with prejudice. Individuals without prejudice are very simple. Simple individuals that, you tell them that, hey, this thing's, I'm going to this class, I'm not sure if it works or not, but they're talking about this cosmic internet that you could connect to and then have these features and then really have its positive effects. But I'm not sure, but we can try. Are you open to try? They say, yeah, sure. Well, I'm skeptical, but sure. Or like they might even not say that they are skeptical. I say like, yeah, I'm open. Let's try it. And that's very simple people. The people with prejudice is the uh, people that are knowledgeable and then they're like skeptical a little bit, but yet open to explore something that they don't know about or they might never heard or it might be out of their uh, possibilities. So they say like, I don't know, that sounds like, impossible to me, but I'm not, you never know. I'm give it a shot. It's free, nothing to lose. Just give it a try. So that's basically a more knowledgeable individual. I'm sorry for the typo. Um, and then we have know-it-all individuals that they assume that whatever they know, however they perceive the reality, is that ultimate version of reality that we just discussed in 10 different ways in the eyes frequency, the speed of motion, the velocity, the capacity and threshold of our perceptions, all those different ways that we discussed, the speed of light, all the ways that we discussed that it limits us to perceive the. First of all, we established that there's no so-called one true version of existence. We could perceive it in infinite different ways. But even that, some people are so convinced that what they perceived is the ultimate model, and anything that falls under outside of that framework, it's not acceptable. They do not want to compromise that. They do not want to engage in any activities, notions, or thoughts that would fall on outside of that, and so they reject it. If you encounter such people, just avoid them. There's a beautiful poetry. It says like the logical people have a wooden leg, and then you can't heal the wooden leg. A wooden leg cannot be healed. So basically, he's talking about like if someone's so rigid, so this rigidity, it can't be malleable by definition. So just, it is what it is. So avoid those people and focus on people that are open. And if you don't know how to explain it, you can even like make them surprised or give them off guard. Like let's say if someone has a headache, but these are all for like next session, so I'm not going to get into it too much because it's not relevant right now. But just to know that there are these categories of people. Some people are willing to encounter something that is out of their knowledge, and then be willing to explore something out of that capacity, and some people are not even willing to explore anything. Now, from this standpoint, uh, it is important to establish a definition as well that is very Erfanic definition, and that is the concept of rent. Let's see if I have it. I don't have the slides here. Rend is, we established this um, definition of the actuality of existence and truth of existence. One, it basically represents what happens on the physicality of it. It's actualized. It occurred. It's an event that is there. You can see it. You can measure it. And then we had the truth of existence when we were talking about the existential coin, and that the truth of existence was that quality aspects of existence, the whyness, whatness, and howness. Now, and then we talked about all these variations of ways that we can perceive existence. In one way, we see it, that cylinder, it exists, we touch it, we say like it's actual, it's real, so it exists. And then in one way, we just like think about it, well, it's just an illusion, so it doesn't exist because it's just emotion, so it doesn't have actually truth of existence, so it's illusory. Now, so we encounter these two aspects of existence that we could perceive the world in front of us. If someone would just only focus on the actuality of existence, becomes someone that is uh, just really actuality viewing, or very logical, or very rigid in the sense that everything is physical. And uh, they, they basically more pursuing the science because it's, is what you can measure and repeatedly and reproducibly. And then it causes individuals to be, more scientific, more like professional in the science, acquiring a lot of skills and things from that world, which is nothing wrong with it. But they're just really focused and limited by the actuality of existence. But now, even today, we, with all this technology that aim to give answer to all these complicated questions, relying only on that level, we failed. Now we understand that there's something else that we can't understand. There's something that we can't really measure. There's something that we can't really use technology to understand. And there's a lot of mystery in this world. So it really made a lot of scientists humble in that sense. Some of them, not all of them, of course. So now, if someone, on the contrary, would just focus on the truth of existence, just saying like everything is virtual, nothing exists, you know, all of this is like illusory. What happens is that they would not have any motivation to do any business or to work or anything like, earthly material oriented, and then they ended up in some sort of desert or in nature, excluded from society, and just basically becoming a person completely separated from society. So there is this two pole, the extreme two pole. One is going far away from the center toward the actuality of existence, which has become the scientific, business minded, very, very um, kind of surface orientation on a physical level. And the other one, it becomes like almost like insane and disassociated from the actuality of existence, denying the physicality of existence, materialistic, any materialistic aspects of existence, and ended up in, deserts and nature, away, secluded, away from the society and secluded. So now, in the path of Erfan, we believe that there is very a specific balance in between, that fine line in between, that no one sacrifices the truth of existence for the actuality of existence, or actuality of existence for truth of existence, which then comes to the definition of rend. Rend is someone that it sees the actuality and truth of existence simultaneously. It looks at the cup, it knows it's cup, but it also knows that it's illusory. Because if it thinks like the cup is very rigid, and then, it's just cup made of like molecules and matter, and then this, atoms and this and that, is very, is denying the fact that there's consciousness behind it, or there's the quantum level features that we can understand and is not as rigid as we think. And if we really go beyond, like going far about that, this is an illusion, then we can really sound like insane, like, so there's this fine line between that the Rend is able to see both world at the same time and remaining in a balance. So such a person would still pursue to understand and investigate and experiment with the world of quality while remaining sane, while remaining in society and still be productive physically, while still, investigating the science, being productive on a material physical level, and also being productive on the spiritual, esoteric, and quality aspects of it. And that's basically something that we want to establish, that this is the aim, that we not, when we talk about the Erfan is a world of ishq and the quality, understanding the quality world, and how the tools of quantity is actually a barrier and limiting factor for us to fly to the uh, skies, divine skies of quality world. We're not saying like the quantity world tools or logic is bad. We're just saying that it has its own function and own purpose, and it needs to be used in its position, and it should not be basically confused and misused in a out of context, resulting unproductivity or confusion or misguidance. So here, the concept of rent is someone that is able to see the truth of existence and the actuality of existence simultaneously, is able to have that balanced understanding. And from such a perspective, the one that the extreme form of truth of existence becomes someone that falls in love in an extreme way to the insanity level. So we have an insane love. And then on the other spectrum, we have a very rigid, scientific, logical, uh, dry type of being. Now combined, we could see this like trend of that insane in love individual becomes sane and wise, and the very cold, rigid, um, limited individual on that business scientific orientation becomes in love, and that balances in the middle, becomes a wise, logical, in love, with all the complexity of the qualities, which is very balanced. And that's the definition of rend. In the world of Erfan, we are aiming for that. We are aiming to not sacrificing one for the other, not denying one for the other, not limiting ourselves for one aspects and get ourselves away from the other. And that's the definition of rend. So understanding this, it really helps us to really separate the things that it belongs to each world and implement what it needs to be implemented according and to that world and compatible with that world, and get the best result. So whatever we're aiming, we know what to do, where we need to put, where we need to surrender, where we need to put will and effort, where we need to let go, where we need to actually implement. So these are really, really important. A lot of the individuals confuse these things and then actually don't get the best out of their journey. Now, in the world of Irfan, which has these specifications, is the world beyond homework. So it's not something that is someone would just do it because they need to get something done or just have it already be done. It's something that it comes out of love and then enthusiasm. It's not just to fulfill a duty. It's something that is not based on some logical calculation. It's something that someone really aims as a result of that general enthusiasm, curiosity, qualities that it seeks, the understanding of the quality world. So the general definition of Erfan becomes something that you're investigating the world, the quality world, reaching illumination, clear-sightedness, revelation, epiphany, the understanding of the existence and the universe. And it's something that cannot be attained through the reason and logic, science and knowledge, but rather through that experience and connection. So we established that. Now, I know that we went already over time, almost an hour. And believe it or not, there's 1/3 of the material that needs to be discussed. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna cut a little bit on the theoretical, and I definitely make sure that I'm gonna cover everything as we left next session. And I want to give you the experiential part of it, so you don't just like walk with a lot of information that I like, gave you like a past 3-4 hours. And that is experiencing. We already experienced fire harmony, and then I already explained you how to use it. I explained you a little bit more for yourself, for now, for the next week, on the next upcoming week. But I want to talk about um, the two other quality experience we're gonna have. But before that, I'm just gonna really go through this, pinpoint the purpose of Faradamani really quickly, because it's important as you're gonna use it through this week. You have some understanding what is the purpose of it. So one of the purpose of the Faradamani is practical introduction to divinity consciousness. I already established that more in within the discussions, but it's important when we use it, the effect, and observe the effect, we can really understand and infer that there is this T-consciousness network existing independently and objectively. And then the implication is that, well, there must have an owner or a creator or something that implemented, which basically gets us closer and closer to the possibility of the existence of God, but on an experiential level. The second thing is that being free from the captivation of the self, which means that we are really wrapped up with ourselves, really kind of uh, really focus on ourselves, our problems, our issues, our life. And very little people would maybe come out of themselves and then want to go out of their way to help others, and then come out of the presence of the self and come out and see if other people have problems as well and offer something to them, because they're already so wrapped up with their own problems and they have own issues. So one of the things that really offers Faradamani is that it, despite of where we at in our life, if you have issues or not, if you have illnesses or disorders, or if you have conditions or anything, it really allows us to have something to offer to someone else and hold a space for other people's problems as well. And that really brings us out of our own focusing only our own problem and realizing that everyone is in pain in one way or the other. Everyone has problems in one way or the other. Everyone's are struggling one way or the other. And then that really brings us out of our that captivation of the self, that we're very concerned constantly about ourself. I'll delve into that more deeper. There's more nuances on that. So the third one is divine opportunity for performing practical servitude, which means kind of following what we were discussing, is that it really allows us to have something to serve others despite of our conditions and situations. We have something to offer. We can really give something back to universe for things that we have, for the maybe privileges that we have, for the opportunities that we have. So in that, sharing is really puts us in a different states of existence, rather than just being a consumer and a user and just being very oriented and concerned about ourselves, but rather to just also like using some of our resources to serve someone outside of ourselves. And the fourth is the recognizing the inner treasure, recognizing that we all have this treasure box of attributes and potential and capacity that is within us, that is hiding. And by discovering it, it really allows us to um, have something to uh, become aware, and then really that have us be transformed in a good way, that this world is not just basically a very rigid physical and with a lot of complications and deficiencies and problems, and we are just basically left alone here with a lot of problems, and there's no help for us to really discover the way to resolve them, but rather we just need to figure it out ourselves, and we're all by our own and things like that. So we really realize that we're not left alone here, and then there is support that is unconditionally provided. We just didn't know how to use it or how to access it. And then the fifth, which is very important, is facilitating the path of collective salvation. This is very important because any path that is individual oriented, it basically, no matter how transformative and how uh, you know how significant causes a growth, a spiritual growth in person, if it's individual, then it remains individual. And if each individuals would have their own individual way to do it, we never can unite on a quality level, and everyone would just be concerned about their own path, and then their own path would be only serving their own self, and then that's not going to work for someone else. And then, so it just creates a lot of individualism, individualistic operation, and ways that it actually doesn't allow us to unify on an equality level. And that's something that I think is very important, because unity is now reduced to the point that we can just live together and not kill each other, which I think is not unity. It's unity, I think, is that we can really agree on a lot of fundamental quality level. And from that quality agreement, heartfelt agreement, we develop a relationship that we understand each other from depth, not just basically, I have my own thing going on, you have your own thing going on. We're just gonna live side by side and not hurt each other. And that we call it unity. So that's cohabitation on the most basic level, and it has nothing to do with unity. But the true unity is when we can agree on an objective truth with a natural law, a harmony, a dance, and a music, that we can all dance together harmoniously for one purpose, one goal, one hearted, that causes a salvation of everyone, is serving everyone's benefit, is not just serving one individual for themselves and sending and serving another individuals for themselves, and everyone basically doing that self-service in one way or the other. And it just brings everyone together, serving everyone else and themselves all together at the same time. So for that, we need to have a quality unity, which also corresponds with the necessity of a quality agreement. And that is something that it can't be achieved through words and concepts and convincing each other, but rather a common mutual experience that would validate each other experiences, and we can come to a quality agreement on quality aspects of existence. So now, just to finish, this gonna helps us to really know how to use the connections. This is very foundational. And then I'm gonna just explain about the aspects that we're gonna experience, and then we're gonna call it done, because we're hitting in 1 hour extra, and I don't want to keep you another hour extra. So you must be already tired, and everyone's like smiling. It's like, yeah, please, no, thank you. Having that confirmed, let's go just cover this very quickly. So we have definition of shahid, which is impartiality of the observer, and we have taslim, which is submission. We talked about that in order for us to experience the connections, there is no prerequisite. You don't need to believe in it. You don't need to do anything. Nothing is needed from your end. But, and that but, it comes down to these two specific states, and which is shahid, or that impartial observer, and taslim, which is submission. And I'm gonna basically tell you what it is. An observer doesn't have any prejudice. It doesn't analyze, is purely observing. While observing, doesn't try to visualize or analyze or try to grasp or try to, think, is it gonna happen? Is it not gonna happen? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? What should I do? Is it something happening? Is this something, even if something happens, is this really happening, or am I like, imagining it? Or what is this for? Why is it happening? So the impartial observer is someone that is just watches. Imagine like you're watching a TV. It's not like with every frame of a movie you keep like thinking about what is happening. Is it happening? Is it not happening? All that analysis. So we want to really try to just observe, purely observe, with no judgment, with no prejudice, being present and not being conditional, in the sense that conditional in a way that no, it's not possible. We are so convinced that everything is physical. We know already that is not going to work. We know already what is possible and what is not. So we're just going to define it as such, and that's it. We just want to be open and just be impartial in that way. So the impartiality is basically means that you're openly observing without any conclusion already established, that whether it's going to work or not, whether it's going to be this way or not, or that way. Also, we want to be being free, which means that not being under the influence of any substances. Because, if you're under influence of any substances, then if anything happens, you're gonna say like, was it like effect of that substance, or was it actually happening? So there's no way to like know the verify our experiences. Also, being surrender, basically not doing anything. We just want to basically sit and relax per se. When I say sit and relax, we really don't need to do anything. What I'm saying is that, when you're watching TV, you're literally not doing anything. So, literally not doing anything. I don't know how else I can just say it, because it's as simple as just observing. That's it. As simple as that. And you can't do it wrong, so don't overthink it. As I said, the only way that you can interfere with your experience is to get to this mind process of, is it happening, is it not happening, analysis. And something you need to know is that as long as the person like intentionally blocking it, uh, regardless of if they experience something, feel something or not, the connection is working. The only way that the connection doesn't work if the person doesn't want it or they intentionally block it, saying like it's not possible. No. So in any of that form, the halqa doesn't work. But other than that, if the person genuinely wanted to work, but maybe they have mind chatter, maybe they can't stop their analysis, maybe they're not able to like really uh, be an impartial observer, the halqa still work, has its effect. It just disables the individuals from experiencing something. And that is also fine. You can just continue using the halqa, and throughout the time and repetition, those things would become better. And also, at the third course, we receive a specific halqa that really allows us to have control over our mind and remain silent and allow us more clarity to experience what is happening on that level. So just use the halqa, and by using I mean like do the nazar. The nazar is that 0 second intentionless intention that basically just snap in the mind, that is very short, and then that just implements the consciousness field is around you, starts scanning you. Doesn't matter if you feel it or not. If you feel something, just let it do the thing. Don't try to analyze why you're having this feeling, what does it mean, why this pain is here, why that pulse is there, why I'm feeling this way. Just let it be. Some people feel like they need to cry, some people get sleepy, some people have some pulses, some energy around them, some all sorts of things. So just observe. You don't need to analyze anything. So we're gonna do that. And basically this is how you use the halqa. So throughout the week, we want you to use the halqas that I mentioned. Again, I want you to really use Faradarmani, and I want you to use general halqas, which is اتصال عام, which is basically the general connection that is in 6 and 10 and 11. For the general one is 10 and the 2 is 11. And then there's 6 p.m. that you can do it. Again, you can do it all throughout the whole time, but those times is specifically designated for another reason that we'll discuss later. Before we go, I want you to experience two things. One is the polarity scan, and one is cosmic force. And if we go back here at the very beginning, I listed in the practical section here. So we have a scan by cosmic force, and we have polarity scan. Now, the cosmic force is what is also being recognized in other schools of thoughts like Tai Chi or Qigong or some yogas. And basically, what they do, they try to use imagination and visualizations to kind of bring that force to their body, but there's no way to really confirm whether it's at the end of the day actually happening or it's just an imagination or visualization or power of suggestion. But here we have a connection that it just basically switches on that aspects and feature. You're able to immediately use it and feel it. What we want to do is that we're just gonna hold our hand. I'm gonna go a little bit back to show you a little better. So like we just want to move our hand like this, like just to feel. We can do it even right now. You don't need to have your eyes closed, but as I'm doing, maybe as we are doing right now, by just moving your hands like this, you might start like feeling something already. But if you don't, maybe you can close your eyes and be more focused and not distracted with me, which we will just give it maybe 5 minutes. And then I want you to feel like what you experience. And like we are immersed by this cosmic force, and by this switching on, it allows us to experience it. It switch on these aspects of our existence that allows us to experience this cosmic force around us. And then it's almost like you're swimming in it. It's like you're moving your hand in a substance, in a thick substance. Maybe like it could be a liquid, it could be maybe thick air, and then it's different than before. And then this is basically something that we are able to actually experience and have that cosmic force be available for certain things. One of it could basically be harmonizing, and can actually help with some of the issues that we could have. Um, and for example, and then also you can hold it towards someone else, like hold your hands like towards someone else, and then have them like scan them, like maybe like have their your hands maybe closed, and then kind of like making this shape around their body a little bit, and then or like hold it just in front of them, and then see if you feel something, a force coming out of your hand, or if the other person feels something comes toward them. You can apply this to someone else, and ask them to give you a report. So let's do this. Let's just give it a 5 minutes, and then just do this movement with our hand, and then see how we feel, if we experience something. We come back, and then I show you the next one. Let's do it. Thank you. I wish I could make it longer, but since we are already past the time, you can explore this now on your own. You don't need to, it doesn't need to be in this time, so you can just do it on your own time, and then play with it and experiment with it. Now let's do the next one, and I explain it how we use it and what we expect, and then we will discuss this in depth next session. So this one is polarity field. We want to hold our hand like this, as we almost like we are holding a ball, and then we want to slowly like you know shorten the distance between our hand, and then going back and forth, almost like you're squeezing a ball. And then you just want to see if you feel a resistance, is almost like you're pressing against something, or like its polarity feels basically like a magnetic field that is almost like getting it closer, is like two similar poles are causing repulsion as we go further away, and then we feel the less resistance as the charges becomes less. So I want to see if you can do this, and then kind of experiment with whether you can feel this polarity there, and then we will I give you more explanation later. So let's do this for like maybe 5 minutes, and we will be back if you have any questions, and then we call it done. Thank you.